Emergency alert. Trust no one. Decoding the shadows.
Emergency alert. This is a priority transmission from the Central Archive of the Renaissance City. A forbidden cipher has been decoded. The message predicts death within the council, and the pattern is repeating. Anyone attempting to read or translate the symbols will not survive the night. Do not trust anyone. Decoding the shadows. This transmission will repeat.
In a Renaissance city steeped in secrets, codebreaker Lucien Delacroix races to decipher a mysterious cipher before it unleashes chaos. As assassins close in and betrayal seeps through every shadow, he must face the ghosts of his past to save the city's future. A story of mystery, danger, and the power of hidden truth. The flickering candlelight casts long shadows across the cluttered desk where Lucien Delacroix sat hunched, his slender fingers tracing the faded ink of an ancient manuscript. The air in the cramped chamber was thick with the scent of aged parchment and beeswax, mingling with the faint aroma of wet stone from the rain tapping softly against the stained glass window. Outside, the Renaissance city-state roared with life, its cobblestone streets teeming with merchants hawking spices and silk, nobles draped in embroidered velvets, and common folk weaving through the throng. Yet, inside this quiet sanctuary, Lucien existed in a world apart, a realm of symbols and ciphers, where every line and curve concealed secrets waiting to be unraveled. His sharp eyes, framed by the shadow of his hooded cloak, darted across the page as he meticulously transcribed the strange characters. The manuscript had come into his possession through a network of informants and antiquarians who recognized his talent for cracking the most elusive codes. Tonight, however, the message before him was unlike any he had seen. A tangled web of cryptic symbols interlaced with religious iconography and archaic numerals. As Lucien's practiced mind worked to untangle the threads, a chilling realization began to dawn. The text spoke of shadows, whispers of death that would soon fall upon the city's ruling council. It predicted a series of assassinations, each more devastating than the last, designed to unravel the delicate balance of power maintained through generations. At first, Lucien regarded the parchment with skepticism. Such ominous portents were not uncommon in his line of work, and many ciphers turned out to be elaborate hoaxes or remnants of forgotten rituals. Yet the precision and layered complexity of this cipher hinted at something far more sinister. His fingers trembled slightly as he sketched the recurring symbols onto a fresh sheet of parchment. Intertwined serpents, fragmented stars, and veiled eyes that seemed to watch from the margins. The silence of the room was broken only by the scratching of quill on paper and the distant tolling of the city bell marking midnight. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the window pane like a warning. The next morning, the city awoke to a shock that rippled through its gilded facades and shadowed alleys alike. A prominent member of the council had been found dead, murdered, in a manner eerily consistent with the cipher's grim predictions. Rumors spread swiftly, carried on the breath of merchants, and whispered in the dim corners of taverns. Fear seeped into the populace, and suspicion poisoned the streets. Lucien felt the weight of the discovery settle upon his shoulders with oppressive gravity. The cipher was no longer a curiosity or an academic puzzle. It was a harbinger of chaos. Determined to prevent further bloodshed, Lucien resolved to delve deeper into the mystery. He gathered his sparse belongings and wrapped his cloak tighter around his lean frame before stepping into the bustling world outside. The city seemed transformed, the usual vibrant colors muted beneath a pall of unease. Eyes glanced furtively from shadowed doorways. Conversations halted when he approached. Trust was a currency more scarce than gold. As he navigated the labyrinthine streets, Lucien's mind raced through possibilities. Who would benefit from such calculated destruction? Could the ruling council itself be fracturing beneath the surface? Or was an external force seeking to exploit the city's vulnerabilities? The cipher was a key, but the lock it opened was hidden in the tangled politics and dark alleys of the city. Back in his chamber, he pored over the manuscript by candlelight, cross-referencing ancient texts and records of past political upheavals. The patterns in the cipher suggested a timeline, a countdown to further deaths that would escalate until the council was left in ruins. Each symbol, each coded phrase, was a piece of a deadly puzzle. Lucien's solitude was broken by a soft knock at the door. He opened it cautiously to find a messenger, a young boy with wide eyes and a breathless warning. A second council member had been assassinated, and the city was teetering on the brink. The codebreaker's heart hardened with resolve. There was no time for doubt or hesitation. The cipher's message was clear, and the stakes could not be higher. As shadows lengthened once more over the Renaissance city, Lucien Delacroix stepped into the gathering storm, determined to untangle the deadly code and protect the fragile order before all was lost. Outside, the murmurs of the city grew louder, carrying with them the promise of intrigue and betrayal that would soon engulf every alley and chamber of power. The chamber was cloaked in shadows where the flickering candlelight danced upon the ancient stone walls, casting a wavering glow over the cryptic symbols etched into the faded parchment that Father Matteo held with trembling reverence. Kneeling before the altar, the aged priest traced a slender finger along the intricate lines interwoven crosses, spiraling vines, and obscure Latin phrases that formed a complex tapestry of religious iconography and hidden meaning. His penetrating gaze sought clarity in the faded ink, every subtle curve of a symbol, a vital clue in unraveling the cipher that had haunted Lucien's thoughts for days. These markings, Father Matteo whispered, his voice a hushed murmur laden with awe and caution, are not mere decoration. They contain a message, a map of sorts, woven into the sacred hymns and prayers. The conspirators have masked their rendezvous within the language of faith itself. Lucien stood silently behind the priest, his sharp features illuminated intermittently by the candle flames. The gravity of the discovery settled heavily upon him. Every symbol was a whisper from the past, a thread linking the present danger to ancient secrets buried beneath the city's venerable cathedrals. A hidden meeting place, Lucien murmured, his mind racing to piece together the puzzle. If we can find it, we might intercept their plans before the next assassination. But the church is a labyrinth of secrets. One false step could mean exposure, or worse. Father Matteo nodded solemnly, his eyes reflecting the flickering light and the weight of responsibility. Faith and treachery entwined. We tread where few dare, Lucien. Later that evening, in the dim, smoke-tinged back room of a bustling tavern, Lucien and Isabella leaned over a weathered map sprawled across a rough wooden table. The chatter and clatter of the crowded street beyond was muffled but persistent, a constant reminder of the city's restless pulse. The scent of damp wood mingled with spiced wine and the faint aroma of burning tallow candles, sharpening their senses. "Look here." Isabella pointed with a slender finger to a symbol on the map that mirrored the one Father Matteo had traced earlier. "This district hidden courtyards, forgotten chapels. It fits the description." Lucien's eyes narrowed as he traced the lines, his mind aligning the cipher's religious symbolism with the physical geography of the city. The conspirators would choose a place sacred enough to deflect suspicion, yet remote enough to conduct their dealings in secret. Their whispered plans were interrupted by a sudden knock at the tavern door, causing both to freeze momentarily. The threat of discovery was ever present, and the city's alleys were rife with eyes and ears loyal to Marcellus Varelli's faction. Yet the urgency of their mission pressed them onward. Back in his study, Lucien unfurled the ancient scroll once more, the parchment crackling softly in the quiet room. The faint tolling of the city's bell tower drifted through the open window, marking the midnight hour and fueling the rising tension. His fingers moved deftly across the paper, deciphering a hidden message embedded within a religious, hymn-coded invitation to the clandestine meeting. "Isabella," he called softly, "this hymn, it's not just a prayer, it's a summons. They're gathering tonight." Without hesitation, Isabella donned her cloak and slipped into the night, her footsteps muffled against the slick cobblestones glistening from a recent rain. The cold air bit at her skin, but the looming threat of discovery sharpened her every sense. As she wound through the shadowed alleys, the city's secret seemed to breathe around her whispers in the dark. The distant howl of a stray dog, the rustle of fabric and hushed voices. She reached the meeting place, forgotten chapel, concealed behind a crumbling facade, its door ajar and shadows flickering within. Every instinct screamed caution, but the stakes were too high to falter. Inside, the air was thick with incense and conspiracy. Figures cloaked in darkness gathered in hushed conversation, their eyes glinting with purpose and menace. Isabella's heart pounded as she strained to capture their words, committing every detail to memory. Meanwhile, Lucien awaited anxiously in the nearby shadows, the weight of the city's fragile order pressing down upon him. The collision of political intrigue and secret societies was no longer theoretical. It was a deadly game unfolding in real time. As Isabella slipped back into the night, their shared glance spoke volumes. Danger was imminent. But so was the chance to strike a blow at the heart of the conspiracy. The night deepened, and with every passing moment, the cipher's secrets drew them closer to the precipice of discovery and chaos. Lucien's mind raced with possibilities and perils. The cryptic religious symbols now a beacon guiding them through the darkness, but also a warning of the shadows that lurked ahead. The city held its breath, teetering on the edge of upheaval, as the codebreaker and his allies prepared to face the unknown. Every whisper, every symbol, every step could mean salvation or ruin. And in the silence between the stones and shadows, the true battle for the city's soul was about to begin. The grand chamber of the council, steeped in the fading light of late afternoon, hummed with the undercurrent of unease. Heavy draperies dulled the sun's reach, casting shadows that crept and shifted as the voices rose and fell in measured cadence. Giovanni Rinaldi, adorned in finery befitting a man of his rank, stood poised at the head of the marble table. His sharp eyes flickered with a predatory glint as he addressed the gathered councillors. His voice smooth yet laced with an unmistakable edge. "Gentlemen," Giovanni began, his tone measured but commanding, "these recent events, this chaos are not merely threats, but opportunities. Opportunities to reshape our city, to claim the power it so desperately needs." His hands gestured subtly, emphasizing his words with the grace of a practiced orator. "The council must seize control, lest we be consumed by the very shadows we seek to dispel." Murmurs spread across the chamber, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging wary glances. Lucien Delacroix, seated near the back, cloaked in his customary dark garb, watched with keen eyes. He noted the subtle shifts in posture, the quick glances exchanged among council members. Giovanni's words were more than mere rhetoric. They were a calculated play in the dangerous game of political leverage. Lucien's thoughts flicked to the cipher, the encoded warnings that had set this city aflame with fear, the chain of assassinations, the tightening noose around the council's neck, all intertwined with the ambitions of men like Giovanni. But more troubling was the gnawing suspicion that the enemy was not only external. Within his own circle, shadows lengthened, and faces once familiar masked intentions less pure. Later that evening, Lucian found himself in a narrow alley, the air heavy with damp and the scent of smouldering wood from a nearby hearth. The flickering light of torches cast long, wavering shadows on the cobblestones, and the faces surrounding him were obscured by ornate masks, a tradition of the city's secret gatherings, each mask a symbol of concealment and revelation, a mirror to the duplicity that now riddled every alliance. Among the masked figures, Lucian caught a glimpse of a familiar gaita hesitation in movement that betrayed a hidden tension. He realized then that trust was a currency more scarce than gold. Each whispered word was weighed against the possibility of betrayal. The cipher's warnings echoed in his mind. The closer he drew to the truth, the more perilous the path became. A sudden rustle drew Lucian's attention. From the shadows emerged Isabella Fiora, her petite frame barely noticeable beneath a plain cloak. Her sharp eyes met his, conveying urgency without words as she leaned closer. "Lucian," she whispered, voice low but resolute, "there are those within our own who watch and report to Marcellus's faction. We must tread carefully. I have learned of meetings, tonight's secret councils within the council itself." Her words tightened the knot of apprehension in Lucian's chest. The city's labyrinth was not just physical, but woven through the very fabric of trust, loyalty, and deception. In the quiet sanctuary of Father Matteo's chamber, the aged priest sat, surrounded by the weight of ancient tomes and fading parchment. His fingers traced the worn edges of a manuscript as he spoke with measured gravity. "Lucian, the path you walk is shadowed not only by enemies, but by the choices of men who wear the facade of allies. The masks they bear are not merely of cloth and paint, but of intention and loyalty. To discern truth amidst such deception requires both wisdom and courage." Lucian nodded, absorbing the solemn counsel. The priest's penetrating gaze seemed to pierce beyond the present moment, into the deeper struggles of faith and power. As the night deepened, Lucian returned to his quarters, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. He sat before a spread of parchment, sketches of cryptic symbols mingling with hastily scrawled notes. The faces of allies and adversaries blurred together, each mask a question, each mirror reflecting the fragile balance of the city's fate. His mind raced with the implications, Giovanni's manipulations, the whispers of betrayal, the thinning line between friend and foe. The cipher's message was clear: danger lurked not only in the alleys, but within the very halls of power. Lucian's fingers paused over a symbol, a silence hanging heavy in the room. The city awaited his next move, its future intertwined with the secrets he sought to unravel. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, he knew that the masks would soon fall, revealing truths that could either save or shatter the delicate order he fought to protect. But the question remained, in a city built on shadows, who wore the true mask and who hid behind a mirror? The answer would come soon enough, but until then, Lucian was left to navigate the dangerous dance of masks and mirrors, where every smile might conceal a dagger and every truth a deadly lie. The game was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The labyrinth of narrow alleys wound tightly through the Renaissance city-state, each turn cloaked in shadow and whispered secrets. Lucien Delacroix moved with measured steps, his keen eyes scanning the dimly lit paths for any sign of movement. The scent of damp stone and faint traces of smoke from distant hearths mingled in the cold night air. Something about this night felt heavier, as if the city itself held its breath in anticipation. Alessandra Sforza was no stranger to these twisting corridors. Her footsteps were light but purposeful, a ghost weaving through the shadows with practiced ease. Lucien had been tracking her for days, the elusive assassin whose name sent ripples of fear through the council's inner circle. She was an agent of Marcellus Varelli's dark ambitions, the physical manifestation of the threat to the fragile order Lucien sought to preserve. But tonight, the pursuit was different. It was no longer just a chase to intercept a killer. It was a journey into a shared past that neither could fully escape. Lucien paused beneath a flickering lantern, the weak flame casting wavering shadows across the cobblestones. His breath formed small clouds in the chilly air as he replayed the fragments of memory that Alessandra's presence had stirred. They had crossed paths years ago, a time before the current chaos, before the betrayals that had fractured their world. He had glimpsed a vulnerability beneath her cold exterior, then a flicker of doubt that now seemed both distant and haunting. A sudden movement caught his eye. From the darkness, Alessandra emerged, her silhouette sharp and commanding. Her eyes, like dark pools reflecting the night, locked onto his with an intensity that sent a ripple of unease through him. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said, her voice low and steady, edged with warning. Lucien stepped forward, hands raised slightly in a gesture of cautious parley. "I need answers, Alessandra. The council's lives depend on it." She laughed softly, a sound as cold and precise as the blade sheathed at her side. "Answers? You think I hold them for you? I serve another cause now. Marcellus's vision is the only truth that matters." Their conversation was a delicate dance, words layered with meaning and memories. Alessandra's loyalty was fierce, her resolve hardened by years of hardship and exile. Yet beneath the mask of the ruthless assassin, Lucien glimpsed the shadows of a shared history, moments of trust shattered, alliances broken by the tides of power. The alley around them seemed to close in, the silence punctuated only by the distant murmur of the city and the soft scrape of leather boots on stone. Lucien's mind raced, piecing together the implications of her presence so close to the conspiracy's heart. "Why, Alessandra? Why betray everything we once believed in?" he asked, voice taut with emotion. Her gaze faltered for a fraction of a second, a crack in the armor, before she replied, "Because some truths are too dangerous to live with. Because the city needs cleansing, even if it means bloodshed." As she stepped back into the shadows, Lucien felt the weight of the encounter settle deep within him. The danger was no longer abstract. It was personal, entwined with the past he had tried to bury. Determined, Lucien turned away, the resolve in his heart igniting like a beacon. He would uncover every secret, decode every cipher, even if it meant confronting the ghosts of his own history. Later, in a dimly lit tavern, tucked away from prying eyes, Isabella Fiora awaited him. Her sharp eyes flicked nervously over the gathered patrons, every whisper a thread in the city's tangled web of intrigue. "She's more dangerous than we thought," Isabella murmured, sliding a folded note across the table. "Marcellus trusts her implicitly. There are whispers she's been to the council chambers, disguised as a servant." Lucien unfolded the note, the cryptic symbols matching patterns he had seen before. The cipher's layers deepened, each revelation tightening the noose around the city's fragile peace. "We must move quickly," Lucien said, his voice low but resolute. "Alessandra is the key to stopping this. If I can understand her motives, perhaps I can anticipate her next move." Isabella nodded, eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "And I'll keep listening in the alleys. The city speaks, if you know how to hear it." Outside, the murmur of the city's shadows grew louder, the alleys alive with secrets and silent threats. Lucien's pursuit was far from over. The assassin's trail stretched before him, dark and twisting, promising danger at every turn. As the night deepened, so did the mystery. And in the heart of the city, beneath the stone and silence, the cipher waited to reveal its final truths. The chase was only beginning. The candlelight flickered weakly against the damp stone walls of the tavern's shadowed corner, casting long, wavering silhouettes that danced with the murmurs of the midnight crowd. Isabella Fiora leaned in close, her voice a hushed thread weaving through the clamor as she exchanged coded phrases with a figure cloaked in the anonymity of the city's underbelly. Each word was a carefully chosen cipher, a thread pulled taut between secrecy and revelation. The air was thick with the scent of spilt wine and aged parchment, mingling with the faint metallic temps of danger that seemed to cling to the tavern's very breath. Lucien Delacroix sat nearby, his sharp eyes tracing the subtle curves of Isabella's lips as she spoke. Despite the warmth of the crowded room, a chill crept along his spine, not from the cool, Renaissance evening outside, but from the ever-darkening horizon of the conspiracy they sought to unravel. The notes scattered across his desk, back at his chambers, haunted him. Coded messages layered with symbols, both ancient and cryptic, each a piece of the sprawling puzzle that threatened to unravel the city's fragile order. "We have eyes everywhere," Isabella whispered after her meeting, her gaze heavy with the weight of the information she had gathered. "But Marcellus's reach grows with every passing day. Some informants vanish before we can even confirm their loyalty." Lucien nodded slowly, the furrows of worry deepening across his forehead. "The threads are tangled more than I feared, and trust. Trust is a luxury we cannot afford. Their alliance, forged in necessity and tempered by whispered confidences, was beginning to fray beneath the pressure of paranoia. Lucien's past failures, haunting memories of betrayal and loss festered in his mind, sharpening his instinct to suspect even those closest to him. Yet Isabella's steadfastness was a beacon amidst the murk, her loyalty a rare constant in the shifting shadows. As they ventured deeper into the city's labyrinthine alleys, the faint echo of footsteps quickened behind them, a reminder that danger lurked unseen. The cobblestones glistened with the residue of an evening rain, reflecting the dim glow of lanterns that lined the narrow passages. Every shadow seemed alive, every silence pregnant with threat. "We must move carefully," Isabella urged, her voice barely audible over the distant clatter of horse hooves and the restless murmur of night watchmen. "One misstep, and Marcellus's assassins will close in." Lucien's mind raced through the cipher's latest revelations, web of coded messages linking secret factions, informants, and betrayals that snaked through the city's veins like poison. The complexity was staggering. A single misinterpretation could doom them all. Yet, amid the encroaching darkness, a spark of hope flickered. The network Isabella had cultivated was vast and resourceful, capable of unearthing truths hidden beneath layers of deception. But with every revelation came risk. Some contacts vanished without warning, swallowed by the shadows they sought to illuminate. Back in his chambers, Lucien traced the curves of a hastily scrawled note, the ink blurred by sweat and haste. The cipher's pattern began to emerge, a sinister choreography of symbols and dates pointing toward the next strike. The city was a chessboard, and Marcellus Varelli, the unseen hand, moving pieces with ruthless precision. "We are running out of time," Lucien murmured, the weight of responsibility pressing down like a stone on his chest. "And I fear the greatest threat is not just from Marcellus's faction, but from those we have yet to suspect." Isabella's eyes met his, shining with quiet determination. Then we must be sharper than ever. Our survival depends on it. The city outside breathed with restless unease, its alleys whispering secrets in the night. Lucien felt the threads of conspiracy tighten around him, each step forward a dance on the edge of a blade. Trust was elusive, shadows grew longer, and the stakes had never been higher. As the chapter closed, a distant bell tolled midnight. Its mournful peal echoing through the streets, a somber herald of the deadly game, unfolding beneath the Renaissance city's gilded surface. The heavy scent of incense hung thick in the small chamber where Father Matteo sat hunched over a worn wooden desk, its surface littered with parchment scrolls and ink-stained quills. Flickering candlelight danced across the cracked walls, casting elongated shadows that seemed to writhe and twist in tandem with the priest's conflicted thoughts. Outside, the city's restless murmurs seeped through the stained glass window, a solemn reminder of the unrest that gripped the Renaissance city-state. Father Matteo's fingers trembled as he unfolded a delicate piece of parchment, its edges frayed from repeated handling. The cipher they had been unraveling bore a new, cryptic segment, one that hinted at a betrayal more intimate and immediate than any before. Yet the priest's mind was heavy, laden not just with the weight of knowledge but with the burden of faith. How could he reconcile the teachings of peace and forgiveness with the brutal realities of political machinations and imminent bloodshed? The line between right and wrong blurred beneath his gaze, and the glow of the candles seemed to flicker in sympathy with his doubt. A sudden knock at the door jolted him from his reverie. Lucien Delacroix entered, his lean frame silhouetted against the murky twilight of the narrow corridor. His sharp eyes, usually so piercing and unreadable, betrayed a flicker of exhaustion and worry. Without preamble, Lucien relayed the grim news. Isabella Fiora had been seized by unknown assailants, her fate hanging precariously in the balance. The room seemed to shrink with the weight of the revelation. Isabella, resourceful, loyal, and indispensable, was now a pawn in a deadly game. Lucien's mind raced, torn between the desperate urge to save her and the pressing need to continue decoding the cipher, whose revelations could expose the mastermind behind the assassinations. Every moment counted. Saving Isabella might cost them the chance to prevent the next murder. Ignoring her plight could mean losing a vital ally forever. Father Matteo's face tightened with inner conflict. "Lucien," he said softly, voice heavy with sorrow, "the path before us is shrouded in shadows. Saving one life may condemn many, yet leaving her to fate weighs on the soul." Lucien clenched his jaw. "I cannot abandon her, yet if I delay, the city will pay the price." Outside, the rain began to fall soft at first. Then, in steady, relentless sheet swashing the ancient stone streets and filling the alleys with the patter of uncertainty. Lucien wrapped his cloak tighter, the dampness seeping through to his skin as he made his way to the cramped chamber where the cipher awaited his attention. The parchment was fragile, its cryptic symbols demanding precision and unwavering focus. Hours passed as Lucien's eyes traced the delicate lines and arcs of the encoded message. Each symbol whispered secrets of betrayal and impending doom. With Father Matteo's guidance, he deciphered the hidden meaning. The next assassination was planned at the upcoming council gathering, and the traitor's identity would soon be revealed. This knowledge was a weapon, but one that required immediate action. Meanwhile, in the bowels of the city, Isabella crouched in the cold, damp cellar where she had been confined. The flickering torchlight outside her cell cast eerie shadows, and the muffled voices above spoke of plans that would upend the fragile order. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from determination. Even in captivity, she clung to the hope that Lucian would come for her. Fingering the hidden dagger concealed beneath her cloak, she prepared herself for whatever fate awaited. Back at the council chambers, Giovanni Rinaldi seized the moment to stoke the fires of suspicion. With a voice sharp and accusing, he questioned Lucian's loyalties, insinuating that the codebreaker's obsession with the cipher was jeopardizing the city's stability. The gathered council members exchanged wary glances, the air thick with political tension. Lucian met Rinaldi's challenge with measured calm, but sensed the widening gulf of mistrust. Torn between the call of duty and the bonds of friendship, Lucian made his choice. He would prioritize decoding the cipher to uncover the full scope of the conspiracy, trusting that rescue efforts for Isabella could be coordinated once he held the key to the enemy's plans. It was a gamble, one fraught with peril and sacrifice, but the fragile balance of power in the city demanded no less. As the rain intensified, turning streets into winding rivers of shadow and light, Lucian's resolve hardened. The crossroads of loyalty and sacrifice lay before him, each path shadowed with danger. Yet in the depths of his heart, a steady flame of determination burned. He would protect the city, even if it meant bearing the weight of impossible choices. The chapter closed on a tense note, Lucian's mind racing with the cipher's secrets, Isabella's silent fight in captivity, and Father Matteo's prayer for guidance. The city's night echoed with whispers of betrayal and hope, a prelude to the storms yet to come. The candle flame flickered weakly against the stained parchment as Lucien Delacroix leaned closer, eyes narrowing as each symbol and curve of the cipher began to align with a terrible clarity. The room around him, the cramped study filled with ancient books and scattered papers, seemed to recede, swallowed by the weight of what he was uncovering. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming gravity of the truth that had just revealed itself. Marcellus for the name echoed in his mind with the resonance of a death knell. The man he had suspected, whose shadow had loomed over every whispered threat and every coded letter, was no longer a vague figure in the distance, but the very heart of the conspiracy. Lucian's breath caught as he traced the intricate script that spelled out Varelli's involvement, an elaborate signature hidden within layers of cryptographic complexity designed to reveal the mastermind only to those capable of deciphering the cipher's deepest secrets. The room was silent, save for the faint scratching of Lucian's quill as he copied the final segment into his notebook. His mind raced through the implications. The timeline of assassinations was accelerating, each death drawing closer to the ruling council. With Varelli's identity confirmed, the fragile political order teetered perilously on the edge of chaos. A soft knock at the door broke his concentration. Father Matteo entered quietly, his aged face drawn and serious. "The council grows restless, Lucian," he said, voice low but steady. "This revelation will change everything." Lucian nodded, gesturing toward the cipher. "It's worse than we feared. Varelli is not just a conspirator, he is the architect. Every death, every message, flows from him." Father Matteo's penetrating gaze met Lucian's. "Then we must act swiftly. The city depends on it." Together, they pored over the cipher once more, the priest's knowledge of symbolism illuminating hidden religious references that hinted at Varelli's next move. The gravity of their task pressed down like the vaulted ceiling of the chapel where they met, the distant tolling of the bell a somber reminder of time slipping away. Later that evening, Lucian met Isabella Fiora beneath the shadowed arches of a narrow alley. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and distant smoke from the city's hearths. Their voices were hushed, urgent. Marcellus Varelli, Lucien whispered. He's the one behind it all. Isabella's sharp eyes gleamed with both fear and resolve. Then we have no time. If the next assassination succeeds, the council will fall. She pressed a folded parchment into his hand-fresh intelligence from her network detailing suspicious movements among Varelli's loyalists. The city's labyrinthine alleys suddenly felt even more treacherous, each shadow a potential threat. Meanwhile, in a richly adorned chamber, far from the alleys where Lucien and Isabella conspired, Marcellus Varelli reclined in an ornate chair. The flicker of candlelight caught the dark planes of his face, illuminating eyes cold and calculating. A faint smile played at his lips as he contemplated the chaos unfolding beneath his careful orchestration. Let them unravel the cipher, he murmured to himself. They believe they hold the key, but the city will burn before I relinquish power. Back in his study, Lucien allowed himself a brief moment to steel his nerves. He was no stranger to danger, but the stakes had never been higher. The mastermind was revealed. The clock was ticking faster than ever. Each decision carried the weight of countless lives. He reached for his cloak, the familiar fabric a small comfort as he prepared to face the gathering storm. The city's alleys awaited, dark and unforgiving, but he was determined. For the fragile order, for the truth, and for those who depended on him. Lucien would confront the ciphers, heart-end, the shadow it cast over the city. The night deepened, but Lucien's resolve burned brighter. The game was no longer one of mere decoding, but of survival and justice. As the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, he stepped into the alleys, ready to chase the secrets that could save or doom the city. And so, with the mastermind exposed and the next assassination looming, the fragile balance of power held its breath, waiting for Lucien's next move. The labyrinth of the city's alleys lay before Lucien like a living puzzle, twisting and turning beneath the heavy cloak of night. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and distant smoke, mingling with the faint murmur of whispered secrets that seemed to cling to every shadowed corner. Rain had left the cobblestones slick and treacherous, reflecting the feeble glow of scattered oil lamps that flickered in the encroaching darkness. Clad in his customary dark cloak, Lucien Delacroix moved with practiced stealth alongside Isabella Fiora. Her small frame and keen eyes made her the perfect guide through this maze of alleys places where the city's pulse beat in secret. Far from the polished chambers of the ruling council, "This way," Isabella murmured, her voice barely above the soft patter of their footsteps. "There's a contact who might have the next piece of the cipher." Lucien nodded, the weight of urgency pressing down on him. Every moment wasted was a moment closer to another assassination, another thread unraveling the fragile order he was sworn to protect. His sharp eyes scanned every shadow, every flicker of movement, wary of the ever-present threat lurking unseen. As they rounded a bend, the sudden scrape of a dagger against stone froze them in place. Lucien's breath caught a glint of steel flashed in the dim light. Alessandra Sforza stepped from the gloom, her dark eyes cold and unyielding. "You cannot hide forever, Delacroix," she said, her voice low and deadly. "The shadows belong to us now." Isabella stepped forward, placing herself between Lucien and the assassin. "We're not so easily cornered," she retorted, her voice steady despite the tension thickening the air. Alessandra's gaze flicked to Isabella, a ghost of recognition flashing across her features before she melted back into the darkness, leaving a chilling promise hanging behind her. The encounter left Lucien's heart pounding, but it also steeled his resolve. They pressed on, reaching a cramped chamber where Isabella spread out a collection of parchments, their edges worn and stained with time. Candlelight danced across the cryptic symbols and coded messages etched onto the fragile pages. "Father Matteo is right," Isabella whispered, tracing a delicate finger along a line of text. "These symbols point to a meeting place beneath the old aqueduct. If we can reach it, we might intercept the conspirators before they strike again." Lucien leaned over the table, the flickering flame casting sharp shadows across his lined face. "Then we have no time to lose." His mind raced, piecing together fragments of the cipher, the whispered warnings and the betrayals that had shadowed his every step. Later, as the city settled into uneasy silence, Lucien climbed to a narrow rooftop, the chill night air biting through his cloak. Below, the maze writhed like a living creature, its alleys tangled and secretive. He exhaled slowly, the breath misting in the cold, his eyes fixed on the distant glow where danger awaited. "We are close," Isabella's voice came softly at his side. "But the shadows grow deeper." Lucien nodded, his gaze hardening. The path ahead was perilous, but he would not falter. For the city, for those he cared for, and for the fragile thread of truth he had sworn to unravel, he would face the darkness head-on. Every cipher cracked, every secret revealed, brought him closer to the heart of the conspiracy and to the deadly confrontation that awaited in the city's shadowed alleys. As dawn threatened the horizon, Lucien allowed himself a moment of grim determination. The labyrinth was no longer just a physical maze, it was a battlefield of wits and will, where every step could mean salvation or death. And in this game of shadows, only the sharpest mind could hope to prevail. The night was far from over. The flickering candlelight cast long, wavering shadows on the damp stone walls of the hidden chamber where Lucien stood, his eyes fixed on the figure before him. The air was thick with tension, every breath a fragile thread threatening to snap. The man once a trusted confidant, now revealed as the source of the betrayal, wore a mask of feigned innocence that did little to conceal the cold calculation lurking beneath. "Why, Matteo?" Lucien's voice was low, a mixture of hurt and fury. "How long have you been feeding them our secrets?" Father Matteo's gaze remained steady but wary. "I did what I believed necessary to protect the innocents caught between these warring factions. I never wished harm upon you, Lucien. Your protection has only brought us closer to ruin," Lucien retorted, his fingers clenching into fists. "Every step we've taken has been anticipated. The assassinations continue because of your silence." A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by the distant echoes of footsteps outside. Lucien's mind raced, the web of deceit tightening around him. The betrayal was a knife twisting in an already fragile alliance, and the stakes had never been higher. Meanwhile, Isabella weaved through the labyrinthine alleys of the city-state, her breath quick but controlled. The night air was brisk, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and smouldering torches. She paused behind a crumbling stone pillar, listening intently to the distant murmur of voices, an ever-present reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. Her fingers grasped a folded parchment, the ink still fresh with coded warnings. "Lucien must know before it's too late," she whispered, pressing forward with renewed urgency. Back in the sanctity of his study, Father Matteo pored over ancient manuscripts, the delicate pages illuminated by candlelight. Each symbol and cryptic note he deciphered chipped away at the veil of secrecy surrounding the conspirators. His mind wrestled with the moral weight of his choices, torn between faith and the brutal realities of political power. As the city's political heart beat erratically, Giovanni Rinaldi stood before the council with a practiced smile, his voice smooth and commanding. "Citizens of our venerable city," he began, "in these turbulent times, We must unite under steady leadership. Let us not be swayed by fear or deception, but instead stand resolute to restore order. His eyes flicked knowingly towards Lucien's empty seat, a subtle but unmistakable assertion of his intent to fill the growing void. Whispers rippled through the chamber, the scent of ambition as palpable as the parchments that lined the council's grand hall. Lucien's world had shifted beneath his feet. The betrayal had fractured his trust, and with the political landscape shifting dangerously, he faced an agonizing choice: to retreat and regroup, or to plunge forward into the tempest that threatened to consume them all. He stepped back from the chamber's threshold, the weight of his decisions pressing heavily on his shoulders. The cipher's deadly predictions loomed larger than ever, and the shadows whispered secrets only the brave or the foolhardy dared to chase. As the night deepened, so too did the web of conspiracy, and Lucien knew that the coming days would test not only his intellect, but the very bonds forged in fire and betrayal. The city held its breath, caught between the fragile hope of salvation and the cold certainty of deception. And in the heart of the labyrinth, the codebreaker prepared for the battles yet to come. Every step shadowed by doubt, but driven by an unyielding determination to unveil the truth no matter the cost. The thread of trust had been severed, but the fight for the city's soul was far from over. Lucien's gaze hardened, his mind already piecing together the fractured puzzle. "Who can I trust?" he murmured, "when even the closest have turned their backs?" Outside, the alleys whispered back, alive with secrets, threats, and the promise of reckoning. The game had changed, and Lucien was ready to play the shadows to his advantage once more. The narrow alleyways of the city-state seemed to close in tighter as Lucien Delacroix moved cautiously, his cloak drawn close to shield him from the biting night air and prying eyes. The shadows curled around the ancient stone walls like living entities, whispering secrets in tongues known only to those who dared to listen. Tonight, the city's fragile peace was a thread stretched taut, and Lucien stood at its edge, ready to confront the darkness that threatened to unravel everything. Ahead, the faint glimmer of torches flickered against the cold stone, betraying the presence of Marcellus Varelli's faction. Lucien's sharp eyes caught the silhouette of his adversary, dark-eyed and imposing. Marcellus exuded the dangerous allure of power corrupted by bitterness and obsession. His aristocratic attire, though elegant, carried an ominous weight, a silent herald of the chaos he sought to unleash. Lucien's mind raced, the cipher's final warnings echoing in his thoughts. Each encoded symbol, each cryptic message, had led him to this precipice. The assassinations were no longer abstract threats, but imminent dangers, and the city's fate hung in precarious balance. As Lucien stepped into the open, the murmur of voices hushed. Marcellus's gaze locked onto him, a mixture of recognition and challenge sparking between them. The alleys seemed to hold their breath, the distant clatter of the city's nightlife fading into an oppressive silence. "You should have stayed in the shadows, Delacroix." Marcellus's voice was low, but carried an undeniable menace. "The codes you cherish are but chains binding you to a crumbling order. Chaos is the only true power here." Lucien's response was measured but firm. "Order sustains us, Marcellus. Without it, the city falls into ruin. Your vendetta will bring only destruction." The tension thickened, words becoming weapons in a battle fought as much with wits as with steel. From the periphery, Isabella Fiora moved like a shadow herself, her sharp eyes scanning for threats, her every step a testament to her resourcefulness and loyalty. She relayed information in subtle gestures, a flicker of light, a whispered note, crucial intelligence that could shift the balance. Alessandra Sforza, the assassin bound to Marcellus's will, observed from the darkness. Her cold efficiency was palpable, a silent promise of violence poised to strike. Yet beneath her icy exterior, the faintest trace of conflicted history flickered when her gaze met Lucien's, hinting at deeper complexities in a web of loyalty and betrayal. Father Matteo, standing near a crumbling stone wall, offered a quiet counterpoint to the brewing storm. His calm demeanor and penetrating gaze reflected the weight of spiritual and moral conflict that gnawed at him. Murmuring prayers under his breath, he sought strength and guidance, aware that the city's fate was entwined not only with political machinations, but with the very souls of its people. The confrontation unfolded like a carefully coded downsiege, move deliberate, each silence pregnant with meaning. Lucien pressed forward, determined to disrupt Marcellus's plans before the next assassination could shatter the council's fragile unity. The alleyways echoed with the clash of ideals, the shadows themselves seeming to pulse with the tension between order and chaos. As the night deepened, the stakes became clearer. The city's fate was not merely a contest of power, but a test of vigilance and trust. Lucien's mastery of codes was his weapon, his shield against the darkness that sought to consume the city from within. But as the first hints of dawn tinged the horizon, a chilling realization settled over him. The edge of darkness was only the beginning. The true battle lay ahead, where every symbol, every silence, could mean the difference between salvation and ruin. Lucien's gaze hardened, the weight of his responsibility anchoring him amidst the swirling chaos. He would stand as guardian against the shadows, decoding the mysteries that threatened to engulf the city and facing the peril that lurked in every hidden corner. For in this Renaissance city-state, where codes decided politics, the line between order and chaos was razor-thin, and Lucien Delacroix was the last bulwark against its collapse. The night's confrontation had ended, but the war for the city's soul was far from over. As footsteps faded into the labyrinthine alleys and the first light cast long shadows, Lucien knew one truth above all. In this world of secrets and silence, trust was the rarest code to break, and the cost of failure was everything. With a final glance over his shoulder, Lucien melted back into the city's embrace, the cipher's whispers urging him onward. The edge of darkness beckoned, and he would meet it with every ounce of cunning and courage he possessed, for the city's future depended on it. And so, with the city holding its breath beneath a shroud of shadows and secrets, Lucien Delacroix stepped forward into the heart of the storm, ready to fight for the fragile light that still flickered amidst the gathering darkness. The chamber was silent, except for the faint crackle of candlelight casting long, wavering shadows upon the parchment-strewn table. Lucien Delacroix sat hunched, his sharp features drawn tight with exhaustion and torment. Outside, the city-state he had sworn to protect settled into night's uneasy embrace, alleys whispering secrets and shadows conspiring as always. Yet inside this small sanctuary, the ghosts of his past stirred more fiercely than any external threat. His fingers trembled slightly as they traced the faded ink of a letter, an old, worn piece of correspondence from his late mentor, Master Gervais. The lines of carefully encoded text danced before his eyes, but it was not the cipher that held his attention now. It was the memory it conjured. Gervais had been more than a teacher. He had been a father figure, a beacon of knowledge in a city drowning in deceit. His sudden death during a political purge years ago had left Lucien adrift, burdened with guilt for failing to protect the man who had unlocked the secrets of so many. A deep sigh escaped Lucien's lips, his breath catching as the weight of failure threatened to suffocate the fragile resolve he had nurtured. Why did I survive when he did not? he whispered to the shadows, the question hanging unanswered in the stagnant air. A soft knock at the door broke the spell. Without waiting for a reply, the door creaked open to reveal Father Matteo, the aged priest whose calm demeanor belied the storm of political intrigue swirling beyond the chapel walls. His penetrating gaze met Lucian's weary eyes with an understanding born of shared burdens. The city's shadows grow darker with each passing day, Father Matteo said gently, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. And yet, it is within the darkest night that the smallest light shines brightest. Lucian managed a faint nod, grateful for the priest's presence. I fear the light within me flickers too weakly, he admitted, voice thick with emotion. Master Gervais' death haunts me still. I cannot shake the feeling that I betrayed him, that my failings have doomed us all. Father Matteo approached, placing a steady hand on Lucian's shoulder. The past cannot be changed, but it need not bind you. Your mentor's legacy lives on in your hands, through your knowledge, your courage. It is not guilt that must drive you, but purpose. Together, they ventured into the cloister garden, where the scent of night flowers blossomed beneath a sky fading from twilight to indigo. The quiet rustle of leaves and distant city sounds formed a gentle symphony, allowing Lucian's mind to unravel the knot of despair. Faith, Matteo mused, is not certainty. It is the resolve to walk forward even when the path is shrouded. You have that resolve, Lucian. If you did not, you would not still stand. The priest's words stirred a fragile hope within Lucian's chest. Yet, as they spoke, the skies above broke open with a sudden thunderstorm, rain pelting the stained glass windows of the chapel like 1,000 whispered secrets. The relentless rhythm seemed to echo the turmoil within Lucian's soul. In the sanctuary's shadowed alcove, Lucian confessed aloud his fears, the spectre of betrayal, the ever-tightening noose of conspiracies, the mounting cost of trust. Father Matteo listened without interruption, offering solace but no easy answers. Strength is born from vulnerability, Matteo said quietly. You carry the city's fate, yes, but you do not carry it alone. Hours passed, the storm's fury abating until only the soft drip of water remained. When dawn finally crept over the horizon, painting the city in hues of gold and rose, Lucian found himself atop the ancient stone walls that cradled the Renaissance city-state. The rooftops below, adorned with terracotta tiles and fluttering banners, gleamed in the new light. The cool morning breeze whispered past him, carrying with it the sense of damp earth and blooming gardens. His cloak flared softly, the weight of the night's confessions lifting from his shoulders. In the distance, the council chambers stood, a fragile bulwark against the encroaching chaos. Lucian's gaze hardened, resolve crystallizing like the stones beneath his feet. The city's shadows might be long, the conspirators cunning, but he would meet them head-on. For Master Gervais, for the innocents caught in the crossfire, and for the fragile order that still clung to hope. He turned away from the rising sun, stepping back into the labyrinthine alleys where danger awaited. The ghosts of the past had whispered their warnings, but now they fueled his purpose. The path ahead was perilous, but Lucien Delacroix was no longer a man haunted. He was a guardian reborn. As the city stirred awake, unaware of the battles waged in silence, Lucien prepared to face the darkness once more. The cipher's secrets still awaited decoding, the assassinations still threatened the council, and trust remained a precious, elusive currency. But within him burned a light no shadow could extinguish, a light born from loss, tempered by wisdom, and ignited by unwavering resolve. And so, with the dawn breaking over the Renaissance city-state, Lucien Delacroix stepped into the day, ready to confront the shadows and uncover the truth that would decide the fate of all. The dim light of dusk had settled over the Renaissance city-state, casting long, wavering shadows into the narrow alleys that twisted like veins beneath the grandeur of the ruling council's marble facades. Lucien Delacroix moved silently, his cloak drawn tight around his lean frame, his sharp eyes scanning every flicker of movement in the fading light. The cipher he had discovered haunted his thoughts, its cryptic symbols weaving a tapestry of impending doom that stretched closer to the council's heart with each passing day. As he turned a corner into an alley veiled in shadow, a familiar figure awaited him. Isabella Fiora, petite, with eyes like sharpened glass. She emerged from the darkness with a grace born of years navigating the city's underbelly. Her plain dress belied the sharpness of her wit and the depth of knowledge she commanded in the whispered networks of informants and secret meetings. "Lucien," she said softly, her voice barely rising above the distant hum of the marketplace. "I've heard murmurs faint, but growing louder factions moving against the council. Your cipher. It's not just a warning, it's a map of their intent." He nodded, the weight of his discovery settling heavier with her confirmation. "I need to know more. The origins of this message, the hands that crafted it." Together, they slipped deeper into the labyrinth of alleys, where the city's true pulse beat beneath the veneer of political order. Lanterns swung gently in the evening breeze, casting pools of amber light that barely pierced the thickening darkness. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and distant smoke, mingled with the whispers of those who lived in the margins merchant's closing shop. Thieves prowling for easy prey, and informants trading secrets like currency. Isabella led him to a concealed entrance behind a stack of crates, a narrow stairway winding down into the bowels of the city. The faint murmur of voices drifted upward, punctuated by cautious laughter and the scrape of wooden stools. Inside, the tavern was a cavern of shadow and murmurs, its patrons draped in cloaks and suspicion. The scent of aged wine and tobacco hung heavy, and the flicker of candlelight painted faces in stark relief. Lucien's eyes adjusted quickly, landing on a table where Isabella's trusted contacts gathered. Names and tidbits flowed like the wine-coded warnings, sightings of unfamiliar figures, and talk of a secret society pulling strings from the darkness. Each piece added another thread to the growing tapestry of conspiracy. Yet, amidst the gathering storm of intrigue, Lucien felt the prickling sensation of unseen eyes, the unmistakable chill of paranoia creeping into his bones. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of Isabella's modest quarters, the two pored over fragile parchments and faded notes. The candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls lined with maps and cryptic symbols. Lucien's fingers traced the elegant script, piecing together the cipher's hidden layers with Isabella's keen insights guiding the way. "These symbols," Isabella whispered, pointing to a cluster of intertwined letters and shapes, "they signify more than threats. They mark locations, meeting points, safe houses, traps." Lucien's mind raced. Each revelation deepened the danger, tightening the noose around the city's fragile order. He understood now that this was not merely a threat of violence, but a carefully orchestrated siege on the very fabric of power. As he stepped back into the moonlit streets, the cool night air bit at his skin, carrying with it the distant echo of footsteps and the faintest whisper of voices. He paused, senses heightened, aware that the shadows themselves might conceal watching eyes. The city held its breath, and so did he, caught in a web of secrets and lies that stretched beyond the alleys and into the heart of the council. The whispered warnings, the clandestine meetings, the coded messages all pointed to a single truth: Trust was a luxury Lucien could no longer afford. The cipher was more than a puzzle. It was a call to arms in a silent war waged in shadows. And the city's fate rested on his ability to unravel its secrets before the next whisper turned to a scream. With Isabella by his side, Lucien steeled himself for the trials ahead. Each step through the alleys was a gamble, each shadow a potential enemy. Yet, within the encroaching darkness, a spark of determination burned bright. The codebreaker would follow the cipher wherever it led, for in the language of symbols and silence lay the fragile hope to save a city on the brink. But as the night deepened and the city's heartbeat quickened, a single question gnawed at Lucien's mind. Who, amid the shifting shadows, could he truly trust? The chamber was cloaked in shadows, the flickering candlelight casting elongated shapes across the walls lined with ancient manuscripts and dusty scrolls. Lucien Delacroix sat hunched over the heavy oak table, his lean fingers trembling slightly as they traced the symbols etched on the fragile parchment before him. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and melting wax, mingling with the faint hint of incense from the adjoining chapel. Tonight was the culmination of weeks spent unraveling the labyrinthine cipher that had threatened to unravel the very fabric of the city-state. Every line, every mark, every symbol was a thread in a web of treachery and secrets. And now the final piece lay before him. His sharp eyes narrowed, absorbing the complex interlocking codes that had defied his understanding until now. The cipher's last segment was more than a mere prediction. It was a map of betrayal, revealing the name of the ultimate target and, chillingly, the identity of the traitor hidden within the council. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on Lucien's chest, a mixture of dread and grim resolve swirling within him. "It cannot be," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the creaking timbers and the distant murmur of the city beyond the chamber walls. Yet the symbols were clear. The final assassination was aimed at none other than Giovanni Rinaldi, the ambitious council member whose shadow had long loomed over the fragile political balance. Worse still, the traitor facilitating the plot was someone Lucien had once considered, an Alea revelation that twisted the knife of betrayal deeper than any dagger. A sudden, soft rustling at the chamber door startled Lucien. It creaked open, and Isabella Fiora stepped inside, her petite frame silhouetted against the faint moonlight filtering through the stained glass. Her sharp eyes reflected the candlelight, glimmering with urgency and unwavering loyalty. "Lucien," she breathed, closing the door behind her with a deliberate quietness. "I have word from our contacts in the underground. The assassins are mobilizing faster than we anticipated. We must act before the council is shattered." Lucien nodded, pushing the parchment across the table toward her. "This is the final cipher segment. It reveals everything. The target, the traitor, the timing. We have no time to lose." Isabella's gaze flickered over the symbols, her brow furrowing as she processed the gravity of the message. "We must warn Father Matteo. His counsel will be crucial." Minutes later, they found themselves in the quiet solitude of the chapel. Father Matteo stood before the altar, the flickering candlelight casting fractured hues from the stained glass windows onto his aged, contemplative face. His penetrating gaze met theirs as they presented the decrypted cipher. "This revelation weighs heavily," Father Matteo murmured, his voice thick with solemnity. "The betrayal cuts deep, and the consequences will ripple through the city's soul. We must pray for guidance, but also prepare for the storm to come." Outside, the city breathed in restless anticipation. The labyrinthine alleys, slick with recent rain, echoed with distant footfalls and whispered warnings. The fragile peace that had held for so long now teetered on the brink of collapse. Lucian, Isabella, and Father Matteo convened with their trusted allies in a secluded courtyard, the air thick with tension and unspoken fears. The faint tolling of a distant bell marked the passing minutes, each reverberation a reminder that time was slipping away. "We cannot afford mistakes," Lucian said, his voice steady despite the tumult within. "Marcellus Varelli will strike soon, and the traitor within the council ensures his path is clear. Our only chance is to intercept them in the shadows before the final blow is struck." Isabella's eyes glinted with determination as she tightened the cloak around her shoulders. "I will rally our contacts in the alleys. The city's whispers will become our shield." Father Matteo nodded, clutching a small leather-bound tome containing prayers and cryptic annotations. "And I will prepare for any unforeseen spiritual battles. This is not merely a physical confrontation. It is a war of souls." The group dispersed into the night, each moving with purpose through the city's twisting veins. Lucian's mind raced, replaying every cipher, every whisper, every shadowed glance. The final cipher had not only exposed the enemy, but forced him to confront the bitter truths of trust and betrayal. As Lucian slipped through the narrow passages, the cold night air biting at his skin, he sensed the city holding its breath alongside him. The flicker of torchlight ahead marked the meeting point, a place where destiny would be decided. Suddenly, a soft footfall echoed from behind. Lucian spun, eyes searching the darkness. From the shadows emerged Alessandra Sforza, her expression unreadable, her presence a stark reminder of the physical peril intertwining with the cryptic dangers. "You move quickly," she said, voice low and steady, eyes cold as steel. "But the city's secrets weigh heavier than you know." Lucian met her gaze, the tension between them palpable. "This ends tonight, Alessandra. No more shadows, no more ciphers." Her lips curved into a fleeting, bitter smile. "We shall see." The final cipher had led them here, to the edge of darkness, where every choice could tip the balance between order and chaos. And as the city's ancient stones whispered secrets in the night, Lucian felt the weight of history pressing upon him. The coming confrontation would define not only the fate of the ruling council, but the soul of the city itself. With the first light of dawn still hours away, the stage was set. The final act was about to begin. The night had settled over the Renaissance city-state like a heavy velvet curtain, concealing the labyrinthine streets and shadowed alleys where power and peril intertwined. Lucien Delacroix moved with calculated silence, his lean frame cloaked in a dark mantle that blended seamlessly with the flickering shadows cast by scattered torches. The chill of the evening nipped at his skin, his breath forming fleeting ghosts in the cold air as he navigated the treacherous maze that had become both his battleground and prison. Every step was deliberate, every sound scrutinized. The cobblestones beneath his boots were uneven and slick with the remnants of an earlier rain, the faint scent of damp earth and aged stone filling his nostrils. His sharp eyes caught every subtle movement, a shutter swaying in the wind, the distant murmur of voices carried through narrow passageways, the glint of a blade briefly reflecting torchlight before vanishing into the darkness. Lucian's mind raced, replaying the fragments of the cipher he had painstakingly decoded. The conspirators were converging tonight, their strike imminent. Each encoded message, each whispered secret had led him to this moment, the heart of the city's shadowed veins, where the fate of the ruling council would be decided. Behind him, a soft rustle betrayed Isabella Fiora's presence. She emerged from the gloom like a wraith, her petite form moving with the grace of someone born to the alleys. Her sharp eyes flicked around, alert and wary. "Lucian," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant clatter of boots. "They're nearer than we thought. The alleys are crawling with watchers. We must be swift." He nodded, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. Trust was a scarce commodity in this game of shadows, and every ally could be a potential traitor. Yet Isabella's loyalty was unwavering, a rare constant amid the swirling tides of deception. Together, they pressed deeper into the maze, guided by Father Matteo's cryptic instructions. The aged priest had uncovered a hidden alcove where a crucial segment of the cipher was etched into the stone walls in fading Inca, message only visible by the flickering flame of a single candle. As they paused to study the script, Father Matteo's calm voice broke the silence. "This is where the path forks. One leads to salvation, the other to ruin. Choose wisely." Lucien traced the symbols with a steady finger, his mind piecing together the meaning. The coded directions were a map not just of the city's geography, but of the conspirators' intentions. The realization hit him with a surge of urgency. The attack was designed to strike at multiple points simultaneously, a calculated chaos meant to overwhelm the council's defenses. Suddenly, the sharp hiss of moving fabric and the faint clink of metal alerted them to an ambush. Alessandra Sforza stepped from the darkness, her cold eyes gleaming with lethal intent. The assassin's presence was a chilling reminder of the physical threat stalking Lucien, an enemy as precise and merciless as the cipher itself. "End of the line, Delacroix," Alessandra said, her voice a silken threat. "You should have stayed in the shadows." Lucien's heart pounded, but his expression remained composed. This city's shadows belonged to no one, least of all to those who would drown it in blood. The alleys seemed to close in around them, the walls echoing the tension as steel clashed and words collided. Amid the chaos, unexpected figures emerged, some allies, some foes revealing their true colors. Betrayal cut deeper than any blade, forcing Lucien to abandon assumptions and adapt his strategy on the fly. The night's deadly dance unfolded under the watchful eyes of the city's ancient stones. Every silhouette a potential threat, every silence pregnant with danger. Lucien's mind raced to decode the final layers of the conspiracy, even as his body fought for survival. As dawn edged closer, the conspirators' plans were stalled but not shattered. The fragile peace of the city trembled on the brink, and Lucien knew this battle was but one in a longer war hidden beneath the surface. Breathing heavily, he exchanged a glance with Isabella and Father Matteo, companions, bound by trust, forged in fire and shadow. The alleys whispered their secrets still, and Lucien was determined to listen. The shadows were gathering, but so was the resolve to face them. And in the depths of the city's heart, the cipher waited its final secrets yet to be revealed. The labyrinthine alleys of the city twisted like veins beneath the evening sky, their ancient stones bathed in the dim glow of flickering torches. Lucien Delacroix moved cautiously, his cloak drawn tight round his lean frame, breath shallow in the cool air. Every step echoed softly off the damp walls, mingling with the distant murmur of the restless city. Tonight was the night, the culmination of weeks of decoding, betrayal, and whispered warnings that had led him here. To the heart of the conspiracy, ahead, the alley narrowed to a choking slit between two towering buildings, shadows pooling in the corners like waiting predators. Lucien's sharp eyes caught the faint glint of metal, perhaps, a blade or a ciphered token. He paused, fingers brushing the worn parchment concealed beneath his cloak, the key to unraveling the deadly plot. Suddenly, from the darkness, a figure stepped forward, Marcellus Forelli. The man's presence was imposing, a shadow made flesh, his dark eyes gleaming with cold calculation beneath aristocratic brows. His attire, rich yet ominous, seemed woven from the night itself, the subtle clinks of rings and chains punctuating the silence. Lucien, Delacroix, Marcellus intoned, voice low and measured, so persistent, so determined. But this city's fate is not yours to save. Lucien met his gaze unflinchingly. I am here to end your game, Marcellus. The cipher has spoken, and your reign of shadows will be exposed. A slow, mirthless smile curved Marcellus's lips. You see order where there is chaos, light where there is only darkness. This city thrives on secret sand. I am its true master. From a side passage, a whisper of movement caught Lucien's attention. Isabella Fiora emerged, her sharp eyes scanning the alley with urgent determination. Her breath came quick, anticipation and fear mingling in her gaze. Behind her, a more silent shadow moved Alessandra, Sforza, the assassin. Cool and efficient, she approached with lethal grace, blade glinting faintly beneath the torchlight. The tension coiled tighter, a living thing in the narrow space. Words turned to warnings. Marcellus's voice grew colder, more commanding. Your friends will fall like dominoes, Lucien. And when the final piece tumbles, this city crumbles with it. Lucien's fingers clenched the parchment tighter. Not if I can help it. Suddenly, Alessandra lunged, blade slicing the air with deadly intent. Isabella reacted swiftly, stepping between the assassin and Lucien, a dagger flashing in counterattack. The clash was brief but fierce, steel ringing against stone. The dance of life and death played out in the shadows. Marcellus watched, unflinching. You cannot protect them all. But Lucien, heart pounding, saw in Isabella's defiant eyes the fragile hope still burning. Then we fight for every secret, every truth hidden in these alleys. The distant tolling of a bell marked the passage of time, its echo a grim reminder of the city's precarious balance. As the confrontation reached its crescendo, trust and betrayal wove an intricate tapestry, each thread threatening to unravel the fragile order. Marcellus's expression darkened, his voice a whisper of menace. This is not the end, Lucien. The shadows will rise again. Lucien stood firm, the weight of the cipher heavy in his hands. Then I will be ready. As the night deepened, the alleys swallowed the figures, leaving behind only the echo of footsteps and the faintest trace of a hope that the city might yet survive the coming storm. But beneath the surface, the threat lingered, silent, patient, waiting for the next move in the deadly game. Lucien's resolve hardened. The confrontation had bought time, but the war for the city's soul was far from over. With every code broken and every secret revealed, the line between order and chaos blurred further, and the shadows whispered their unending promise. He drew his cloak tighter and disappeared into the night, ready to face whatever darkness awaited in the alleys ahead. The chamber was cloaked in shadows, the only light a trembling candle set upon a rough-hewn wooden table. Lucien Delacroix stood rigid, eyes sharp and unyielding as he faced the figure who had shattered the fragile trust woven among their circle. The air was thick with tension, each breath a whispered accusation. Why? Lucien's voice was low but edged with the weight of betrayal. Why turn against us when the city itself hangs by a thread? The betrayer, a once trusted confidant, whose face was now etched with guilt and defiance, averted their gaze. The walls, carved from ancient stone, seemed to close in with the gravity of the moment. Outside, muffled footsteps echoed faintly, a reminder that danger lurked beyond these walls, eager to pounce on any sign of weakness. Isabella Fiora's sharp eyes flicked to Lucien, her presence a steadying force amid the rising storm. She had risked everything to bring this moment to fruition. Her deft navigation through the city's labyrinthine alleys had gathered the intelligence needed to corner the traitor. "We cannot afford more fractures," she murmured, voice firm yet tinged with sorrow. "The city's fate depends on unity, even if forged through pain." Father Matteo sat nearby, his aged hands resting on a worn tome, his penetrating gaze fixed on the unfolding drama. His wisdom had been a beacon throughout their ordeal, guiding Lucian through cryptic religious symbols and the tangled web of conspiracies. Now, his calm demeanor belied the storm of conflicted emotions beneath. "Forgiveness is a path, but vigilance must never waver," he intoned softly. The revelation of treachery sent ripples through their fragile alliance, but Lucian's swift and measured response steered them back from the precipice. He knew the city's shadows were long and treacherous. But this moment marked a turning point, the beginning of the end for those who sought to unravel the delicate order. As Isabella prepared to relay urgent intelligence to their scattered allies, the cold night air enveloped her breath in mist. Every step she took was a silent testament to courage and determination. The narrow alleys whispering secrets only she could discern. Her swift movement and keen instincts shifted the balance, delivering hope where despair had threatened to take root. Within the sanctum of ancient manuscripts, Father Matteo's focused study uncovered a passage hinting at the conspirators' next moves. The flickering candlelight danced across his face, illuminating the wrinkles of burden and resolve. His discovery was a key that unlocked the final layers of deception, enabling Lucian's team to anticipate the enemy's stratagems. The conspirators' secret meeting, once a place of sinister design, descended into chaos as Lucian and his allies closed in. The clash of hurried footsteps and sharp commands filled the night, the fragile peace of the city teetering on the edge of upheaval. Yet, in that moment, victory gleamed, tempered by the knowledge that shadows still lingered. And the fight was far from over. Amid the turmoil, Lucian felt a cautious hope taking root. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also galvanized their resolve. Trust had been broken but not extinguished. The delicate balance of power now rested on the shoulders of those who dared to stand against the darkness with light wrought from knowledge and loyalty. "We move forward," Lucian declared, voice steady with newfound authority. "Not as fractured allies, but as guardians of a city that cannot afford to fall into chaos. Every symbol, every silence holds a meaning, and we will decode them all." Outside, the city breathed in the night, its alleys alive with secrets and whispers. Lucian's gaze lingered on the horizon where dawn threatened to break. The battle had shifted, but the war for the soul of the city was far from decided. Yet in this moment, the shadows had been pushed back, if only slightly, by the unyielding pursuit of truth and the courage to confront betrayal head-on. And as the first light touched the rooftops, Lucian knew the path ahead would be fraught with peril, but never without hope. For in the cipher of shadows, every code broken was a step closer to salvation, and every trust rebuilt a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. The night's revelations would echo through the silent alleys for days to come, a testament to the fragile yet enduring spirit of a city where loyalty was the rarest code of all. But even as victory settled like a fragile veil, Lucian's mind raced with the question that would not fade: who else lurked in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The answer lay hidden still, in the silent spaces between symbols, waiting to be uncovered. The labyrinthian alleys of the Renaissance city-state seemed to close in around Lucien Delacroix as dusk surrendered to the deepening night. The faint flicker of torches cast wavering shadows across the worn cobblestones, their light barely penetrating the oppressive darkness that hung like a shroud. Every footstep echoed with purpose. Every breath carried the weight of unspoken threats. Tonight, the pursuit of truth and the shadows of betrayal converged in a final, deadly confrontation. Lucien's lean figure melded into the night, his cloak drawn tight about his shoulders, eyes sharp and alert beneath his hood. He moved with practiced stealth, the silent rhythm of his steps a testament to years spent navigating the city's intricate web of secrets. Ahead, the silhouette of Alessandra Sforza emerged, her presence as chilling and precise as the blade she wielded. Her pale features were carved with cold determination, yet beneath the steely gaze, Lucien sensed a storm of conflicting emotions. "Lucien," she said, her voice low but steady, carrying the weight of their shared history. "I never wished it had to come to this." He studied her carefully, memories of their past encounters flickering like ghostly images. Alessandra was no mere assassin. Her loyalty was a tangled thread woven through betrayal and survival, a thread linked inexorably to him. Why, Alessandra? Why serve Marcellus Varelli with such ruthless devotion? Her eyes flickered with a shadow of regret. Because power demands sacrifices. Because sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to embrace the darkness. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Lucien's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of her story, the hidden past that had driven her into the assassin's life, the personal costs borne silently. Yet he knew that sentiment alone would not halt the tide of violence threatening to engulf the city. Without warning, Alessandra lunged, her blade slicing through the cold air. Lucien parried swiftly, steel clashing with steel in a sharp, ringing symphony that shattered the night's stillness. Their duel was a dance of skill and desperation, each strike a conversation between two souls bound by fate. The narrow alleys bore witness to their fierce contest, the scrape of leather, the clatter of weapons, the rapid breaths mingling with the city's distant murmurs. Despite her deadly precision, Alessandra's movements betrayed fatigue, the toll of her internal struggle evident in the slight falters. Lucien pressed the advantage, his calm resolve contrasting with the assassin's fierce intensity. Finally, a deft maneuver disarmed her, sending her blade clattering against the stones. Breathing heavily, Alessandra sank to her knees, eyes lifted to meet Lucien's. "It's over," she whispered, a fragile acceptance threading through her voice. Lucien knelt beside her, the flickering torchlight revealing the vulnerability beneath her hardened exterior. "You don't have to be a prisoner of your past," he said softly. "There's still a chance to choose a different path." For a moment, the city's relentless intrigue seemed to pause, suspended in the quiet aftermath of their encounter. The assassin's defeat was more than a tactical victory. It was a turning point in the battle for the city's soul, a moment where the human cost of loyalty and betrayal was laid bare beneath the unyielding gaze of dawn. As the first light crept over the rooftops, Lucien helped Alessandra to her feet, both aware that the struggle was far from over. The shadows that had long haunted the alleys still lingered, whispering of secrets yet to be uncovered and dangers yet to be faced. But for now, in this fragile moment of resolution, the fragile balance of power trembled on the edge of change. Lucien's resolve hardened. With the assassin's end, a new chapter in the city's volatile narrative was beginning, one where trust would be tested, alliances forged, and the cipher's deadly puzzle edged closer to completion. The shadows might never fully recede, but as long as he stood watch, the city would not fall without a fight. And so, beneath the awakening sky, Lucien Delacroix prepared to face the challenges ahead. The echoes of betrayal and loyalty intertwined in the very codes he sought to unravel. The game was far from over, but the assassin's end marked a pivotal step toward the fragile dawn of hope. The grand chamber of the city-state's ruling council was suffused with the delicate glow of morning light filtering through the stained glass windows, painting fractured mosaics of color across the marble floor and the faces of the gathered assembly. Lucien Delacroix stood at the center, his lean figure cloaked in the familiar dark fabric that had become his armor against the city's shadows. In his hands, he held the fruit of months of tireless work, documents, ciphers, and decoded correspondences that laid bare the depths of the conspiracy that had nearly toppled the fragile political order. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The murmurs of council members hushed as they awaited Lucien's words. His sharp features betrayed no hint of the turmoil roiling beneath his calm exterior, but inside, his mind raced with the weight of what he was about to reveal. He took a steadying breath, then began. Honored members of the council, Lucien's voice cut through the silence, clear and unwavering. What I present today is not merely a collection of cryptic texts, but a testament to the betrayal that has festered within our very walls. The cipher I uncovered predicted a series of assassinations, each one designed to dismantle this council and plunge our city into chaos. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the chamber. Giovanni Rinaldi's eyes narrowed, his posture stiffening as he exchanged glances with other council members. Lucien's gaze swept the room, noting not all were shocked. Some masked their reactions with calculated detachment, others with barely concealed relief. Isabella Fiora stood nearby, her petite frame tense but composed. She had been Lucien's steadfast anchor throughout the ordeal, her resourcefulness and intimate knowledge of the city's underbelly proving indispensable. As Lucien detailed the evidence-encrypted letters decoded, secret meetings exposed, the shadowy faction led by Marcellus Varelli, unmasked, Isabella's mind raced beyond the chamber. She knew that outside these walls, the city's alleys still whispered of danger, and vigilance was far from over. After Lucien concluded, the council erupted into heated debate. Giovanni Rinaldi was among the first to speak, his voice sharp. This revelation, while alarming, demands a careful response. We cannot allow panic to unravel the very fabric of our governance, but it also exposes the fragility of our unity. We must act decisively. Lucien met his gaze evenly. Decisive action requires truth, not silence or suppression. Only by acknowledging the depths of this betrayal can we begin to rebuild trust. The ensuing hours were a blur of accusations, defenses, and fragile negotiations. Old alliances fractured under the strain, while unexpected coalitions formed around the shared desire to prevent the city from descending into chaos. Father Matteo, the council's spiritual advisor, lent a measured voice to the proceedings, reminding all of the moral imperatives that transcended political squabbles. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of the chapel, Father Matteo knelt in contemplation. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the ancient texts he reverently studied. The revelations shook him to his core, yet he found solace in the enduring strength of faith and the resilience of the human spirit. His thoughts wandered to Lucien and Isabella, whose courage had illuminated the darkness threatening to engulf the city. Meanwhile, Isabella navigated the labyrinthine alleys with practiced grace, her sharp eyes vigilant for any sign of lurking threats. The city's pulse was erratic, a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Each whispered secret she gathered was a thread weaving into the tapestry of the city's future that depended on the fragile balance of power now in flux. In a shadowed corridor near the council chambers, Giovanni Rinaldi confronted Lucien. The air between them was charged with unspoken rivalry and mutual recognition of each other's strengths and threats. You have shaken the foundations, Delacroix. Giovanni said quietly, a thin smile playing on his lips. But be warned, power vacuums invite all manner of ambition. Lucien's eyes were steely, and I intend to ensure that ambition does not lead us back into darkness. As the day waned, the city itself seemed to hold its breath. The reckoning had begun. The fragile peace was no longer guaranteed, but for the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope that through truth and vigilance, the shadows could be kept at bay. Yet Lucien knew this was only the beginning. The conspiracies unearthed were but surface ripples of deeper currents beneath the city's political waters. The alliances forged in urgency would be tested by time and temptation, and in the alleys where silence reigned, new threats would inevitably emerge. Still, as he stepped out into the fading light of the evening, the cool breeze carrying the mingled scents of stone and wood smoke, Lucien felt a resolute fire kindling within him. The city had survived its darkest hour, but its survival depended on guardianship, and he would be that guardian, deciphering the codes not just of ciphers, but of loyalty, trust, and power. The chapter closed not with an end, but with a promise, that in the heart of the Renaissance city-state, amid its codes and shadows, the pursuit of truth was an unending quest, and the dance between order and chaos would continue, as intricate and perilous as the ciphers Lucien so expertly unraveled. And as night deepened, the city held its breath once more, waiting for the next move in a game of shadows where only the keenest minds and boldest hearts could hope to prevail. The city-state of Serenza had quieted, but the silence was deceptive. A fragile veil stretched thin over its restless streets. Lucien Delacroix stood atop the battlements of the old watchtower, the cool evening air brushing against his cloak as the sun dipped below the horizon. Below him, the labyrinthine alleys folded into darkness, their twisting paths swallowing light and sound alike. The city breathed, alive with secrets and whispers, and Lucien's sharp gaze sought the faintest sign of disturbance. His fingers absent-mindedly traced the patterns he had sketched countless times, a cipher within a cipher, a code that had saved the council and perhaps the city itself. Yet the calm was uneasy. The threads of conspiracy had been severed, but he knew well that shadows rarely vanished. They only retreated, gathering strength for their next move. In the heart of the city, the tavern where Lucien often met Isabella Fiora was a refuge from the encroaching darkness. The low murmur of voices mingled with the clink of glass and the crackle of a dying fire. Isabella, ever vigilant, leaned forward, her eyes sharp beneath the flickering candlelight. "The streets are restless," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Rumors speak of new alliances forming, more dangerous than before." Lucien's jaw tightened. She hesitated, glancing around to ensure they were not overheard. A faction neither of us recognized before, men and women weaving their own web, using old symbols twisted into new threats. Father Matteo, seated beside them, nodded gravely. "The past is never truly past. The cycles of betrayal and power repeat, and those who forget history are doomed to recreate its darkest chapters." Lucien absorbed their words, the weight settling over him like a mantle. He had fought to decode the cipher, to thwart the assassins and preserve a fragile peace. Yet now, it seemed, the peace was but a pause between storms. Later that night, in the solitude of the chapel, Father Matteo pored over ancient manuscripts. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the worn pages, illuminating cryptic symbols that echoed those found in the cipher. His fingers traced the inked lines as if seeking to unlock a secret whispered across centuries. "There is a pattern," he murmured to himself, "a resurgence of darkness beneath the surface." the city's fate remains entwined with the unseen battles waged in silence. Meanwhile, in the council chambers, Giovanni Rinaldi observed these developments with a calculating eye. Draped in robes that symbolized his rank, he moved with the measured grace of a man accustomed to power. Yet beneath his composed exterior lay ambition sharpened by distrust. Lucien's meddling had unsettled the delicate balance, and Rinaldi was prepared to capitalize on any fracture. The city was a game board, and he intended to be the player who controlled the board. As dawn approached, Lucien returned to his study, the walls lined with manuscripts and cryptic notes. A new letter lay upon his desk, its seal unfamiliar, folded parchment inscribed in a cipher that even he found unsettlingly complex. Decoding it revealed a chilling message. The conspiracy was not defeated. It had only evolved, its tendrils reaching deeper into the city's veins. The balance of power remained precarious, and the shadows that lurked in every corner promised that vigilance must never wane. Lucien's resolve hardened. He was no longer merely a scholar of codes, but a guardian of Serenza's fragile order. The ciphers, the symbols, the whispered secrets in the alleys, they were his weapons and his burden. As the city stirred awake, unaware of the silent war waged in its veins, Lucien prepared to face the lingering shadows. For, in Serenza, peace was never a promise but a challenge, and the codebreaker stood ready to meet it once more. The streets awaited, cloaked in dawn's early light, but beneath the surface, the game had only just begun. Lucien's eyes narrowed as he stepped into the alleys, the weight of the city's fate settling upon his shoulders. The shadows lingered, and so would he. Rain pattered softly against the narrow window panes of Lucien Delacroix's modest study, a steady drumbeat that echoed the restless turmoil within his mind. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across the scattered parchments and cryptic symbols etched meticulously on the worn wooden table. Lucien sat hunched, fingers tracing the faded ink of his notes. Each line a reminder not only of the conspiracy he sought to unravel, but of the personal costs exacted along the way. He exhaled slowly, the weight of recent betrayals pressing upon him. The city, its labyrinthine alleys, whispered secrets, and fragile political order felt heavier now, burdened not just by shadows of corruption, but by the fractures in trust that his pursuit had wrought. His eyes, sharp yet weary, fixed on a faint sketch of a symbol he had been deciphering when the news had come. Another ally had turned, another friendship broken. A soft knock interrupted the heavy silence. Isabella Fiora stepped inside, her petite frame silhouetted against the dim hallway light. Her sharp eyes, usually so alert and calculating, softened as she approached. Without a word, she placed a steadying hand on Lucien's shoulder, a silent gesture of solidarity that cut through the gloom. "You bear the weight of the city and your own conscience," she said quietly, her voice a bomb amid the storm, "but you do not carry it alone." Lucien allowed himself a moment's respite, the knot in his chest loosening just enough to draw a shaky breath. "The truth demands a price," he murmured, "but I fear I have paid too much already." Isabella's gaze met his, unwavering. "And yet, without your resolve, who else would stand against the darkness creeping into every corner of this city?" Their quiet exchange was soon joined by the soft creak of the chapel door opening. Father Matteo entered, his aged features etched with the wisdom of years and the burdens of faith. His penetrating gaze settled on Lucien, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "The path you walk is fraught with shadows," Father Matteo said, his voice steady yet tinged with sorrow. "But even in darkness, the light of truth must be kindled, however dim it may seem." Lucien rose, weary but fortified by their presence. It is not only the conspirators who threaten the city, but the fractures among those who seek to protect it. Trust is a scarce commodity. The priest nodded solemnly. Faith, like trust, is tested by trial. Yet it is through such trials that we discover what endures. Later, as the rain thickened outside, Lucian found himself wandering the slick alleys alone. The cold night air bit through his cloak, but his steps were steady, a quiet determination etched into every movement. The city seemed to whisper its secrets, unknew its shadow, a reminder of the dangers he must face. Each silence weighted with the cost of truth. Despite the solitude, Lucian carried with him the support of those few he could still call allies. Around a worn wooden table, he, Isabella, and Father Matteo shared a sparse meal. The flicker of candlelight illuminated their tired yet resolute faces. The silence between them filled with unspoken promises and shared burdens. "We have come far," Isabella said softly, breaking the quiet. "But the road ahead demands more than courage. It requires sacrifice." Lucian met her gaze. "And yet, without sacrifice, there is no victory, no peace." Father Matteo lifted his cup in a solemn toast. "To those who bear the cost of truth, may their resolve never falter." The warmth of their small fellowship stood in stark contrast to the coldness lurking beyond the city walls. Yet even as hope flickered within the chamber, Lucian knew the battle was far from over. Every revelation, every broken bond, every whisper of betrayal was a thread in the tapestry of chaos threatening to unravel the fragile order he was sworn to protect. As the candle burned low, Lucian's thoughts returned to the question that haunted him most. Could he sustain this relentless pursuit without losing himself for those he held dear? The shadows outside deepened, but within him a steadfast light burned on, guiding him through the encroaching night. The cost of truth was high, but for Lucien Delacroix's surrender was never an option. The city depended on it, and so did he. And yet, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, a distant echo of footsteps reminded him that in the alleys of power, the game of shadows was never truly over. He tightened his cloak around his lean frame, steeling himself for the trials yet to come. The fight for the city's soul was far from finished. The chamber of the ruling council was alive with a quiet but potent energy as the morning light spilled through the stained glass windows, casting fractured hues across polished wooden tables and the faces of those assembled. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and old parchment, a reminder of centuries of power and tradition held within these walls. Today, however, was different. Today, the fragile balance of the city-state's political order was being tested in a way that none present could ignore. Lucien Delacroix stood near the entrance, his lean frame partially obscured by the heavy cloak he wore. Despite the warmth of the early sun, his sharp features betrayed the chill of uncertainty that gripped him. The events of the past weeks, the betrayals, the coded messages, the assassinations narrowly averted, had all led to this moment, the council's first tentative steps toward reform. He watched as Giovanni Rinaldi, the ambitious council member whose distrust of Lucien had been a constant thorn, rose to speak. His voice, steady and laced with subtle challenge, echoed through the chamber. "We stand at a crossroads," Rinaldi declared, his gaze sweeping the room. "The revelations brought to light by Signor Delacroix have shaken us to our core. Yet, we must not allow fear to dictate our course. These reforms, though necessary, must be measured and deliberate. We cannot afford to unravel the delicate fabric that holds our city together." Murmurs of agreement and dissent rippled among the council members. Lucien noted the tension etched on their face, soap mingled with suspicion. the age-old dance of power, wary of disruption. He knew all too well the shadows that lingered behind words and gestures, the hidden ciphers of intent that often spelled betrayal. Isabella Fiora, standing nearby, caught his eye and offered a small, encouraging nod. Her presence was a bomb amid the storm, a reminder of the city's pulse beyond these gilded walls. She was already thinking about the whispers in the alleys, the undercurrents of unrest that no council chamber could fully contain. As the debate unfolded, Father Matteo's calm voice rose to speak, weaving moral reflection into the political discourse. Peace is not merely the absence of conflict, he intoned, but the presence of justice and understanding. Our faith calls us to shepherd this city with wisdom and compassion, lest we fall prey once more to the darkness of deceit. The council listened, some with bowed heads, others with eyes narrowed in contemplation. The priest's words carried weight, grounding the discussion in a deeper sense of purpose beyond ambition. Throughout the morning, proposals surfaced, increased transparency in council decisions, protections for whistleblowers, and the establishment of a secretive but accountable body to oversee the integrity of political processes. The very body, Lucien, might one day aid with his cryptographic expertise. These ideas sparked heated exchanges, but the undercurrent was one of cautious optimism. Outside the council hall, the city began to stir. Isabella moved through the bustling marketplace, her senses attuned to the murmurs of the crowd. The people were weary but hungry for change, their whispered hopes tempered by the scars of recent betrayals. She caught fragments of conversations, some hopeful, others laden with doubt, knew that the path ahead would require vigilance as much as courage. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the city's cobblestones, Lucien found himself drawn to a quiet chapel. The flickering candlelight danced on the walls as Father Matteo knelt in silent prayer, his face etched with the weight of the city's future. Lucien joined him, the silence between them a testament to shared resolve. "The city is changing," Lucien murmured, "but so too are the dangers." The priest nodded slowly. "Change always invites shadows to follow. It is how we face them that defines us." Lucien's gaze hardened with determination. He had uncovered the cipher that threatened to unravel the city's order, and now he stood as a guardian of its fragile peace. Yet he knew the work was far from over. The code of silence and secrecy that wove through the alleys and chambers of power would not be broken so easily. As night descended, the city held its breath. The reforms were a beacon of hope, but beneath the surface, the ever-present threat of betrayal lurked in the shadows. Lucien's journey had transformed him from a solitary scholar haunted by past failures to a vigilant protector of the delicate balance between order and chaos. The alleys whispered their secrets still, and Lucien listened, ready to face whatever new ciphers the shadows might conceal. The city was transformed, but the shadows remained, watching and ever ready to emerge anew. The twilight sky stretched over the Renaissance city-state like a vast canvas of muted gold and dusky violet. The last rays of sunlight slipping beneath the terracotta roofs and curling around the spires of ancient cathedrals. From the vantage of a solitary rooftop, Lucien Delacour gazed out over the labyrinth of alleys, plazas, and shadowed corners he had come to know so intimately. The city breathed beneath him, alive with secrets, whispers, and the unspoken codes that shaped its destiny. He drew his cloak tighter against the evening chill, the fabric brushing softly against his lean frame. The scents of damp stone and fading roses mingled in the cooling air, carrying memories of countless nights spent unraveling mysteries and chasing elusive truths. Tonight, however, was different. Tonight marked a turning point, not an end, but a beginning of a new chapter in his life's relentless pursuit. Lucien's mind drifted back to the events that had brought him here. The cipher that foretold a deadly chain of assassinations, the betrayals that had cut deep into his circle, and the final confrontation that had exposed the mastermind behind the chaos. The city had teetered on the brink of collapse, and yet, through grit and determination, balance had been restored for now. But balance in a city built on secrets and shadows was fragile, like a crystal resting on the edge of a blade. He descended from the rooftop with measured steps, the cobblestones echoing faintly beneath his boots. His destination was the modest chamber that had become his sanctuary, a room lined with towering shelves crammed full of ancient manuscripts, vellum scrolls, and cryptic tomes that whispered secrets from centuries past. Candlelight flickered across the spines of books, casting quivering shadows that danced like silent phantoms. Lucien settled at his desk, the surface cluttered with fragments of decoded messages and symbolic sketches that sprawled across parchment. His fingers traced the delicate curves and angles of a recently uncovered cipher segment, the faded ink still vivid in his memory. Every symbol, every stroke, was a thread in the intricate tapestry of the city's hidden politics. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him. To be the guardian of such knowledge was to accept a life of solitude, vigilance, and unending caution. Yet, despite the burden, there was an undeniable clarity in his purpose. He was no longer merely a scholar chasing elusive truths. He was a sentinel standing between order and chaos. A soft knock at the door stirred him from his reverie. "Enter," Lucien called, his voice steady. Isabella Fiora stepped into the room, her sharp eyes scanning the scattered parchments with a practiced gaze. Petite and unassuming in appearance, she moved with a grace that belied her tough upbringing amid the city's shadows. "I thought I might find you here," she said quietly. Lucien nodded, gesturing to a worn chair beside him. "The city is restless tonight. The calm is deceptive." Isabella sat, clasping her hands together. "The factions we exposed are quiet for now, but shadows linger. I've heard whispers, new movements in the alleys, coded exchanges that don't match any known cipher." He frowned, the familiar knot of unease tightening in his chest. "Then our work is far from over." A silence settled between them, thick with unspoken fears and a shared determination. Their alliance had been forged in the crucible of danger, and though trust was a precious and scarce commodity, they had become indispensable to one another. Later, in the vaulted cathedral where stained glass windows cast kaleidoscopic patterns across the stone floor, Father Matteo stood in quiet contemplation. The heavy scent of incense mingled with the faint murmur of evening prayers, creating an atmosphere of solemn reverence. His penetrating gaze rested upon Lucien, who had come seeking spiritual guidance amid the turmoil of his new role. "The path you walk," Father Matteo began, "is fraught with shadows, but remember that light persists even in the darkest places." Lucien nodded, absorbing the priest's words. "I must remain vigilant, not only for the city, but for those who still believe in its fragile promise." The priest's hands folded in silent prayer. "And may that vigilance be tempered with wisdom and humility." As the night deepened, Lucien returned once more to his chamber. The flickering candlelight, a solitary beacon against the encroaching darkness. He sketched a new symbol onto parchment, a circle enclosing a delicate balance of lines and dots, representing unity amidst complexity. This symbol would become his emblem, a reminder of the delicate equilibrium he was sworn to protect. Though the immediate threat had been quelled, the city's labyrinthian alleys and whispered secrets promised that new challenges would arise. Lucien understood now that his role was not a destination, but an ongoing journey, a legacy of codes and silence that demanded eternal guardianship. The candle guttered, casting a final flicker of light before surrendering to the darkness. Lucien's eyes, sharp and resolute, remained fixed on the unseen horizon, ready to face whatever shadows the city would cast next. The chamber was cloaked in shadows, the faint scent of aged parchment and flickering candle wax filling the air. Lucien Delacroix adjusted his cloak as he stepped carefully into the monastery's archive, the heavy oak doors groaning softly behind him. Here, amid the labyrinth of scrolls and manuscripts, he sought the wisdom of Father Mateo, the city's spiritual advisor and keeper of many hidden truths. The priest awaited him by a towering bookshelf, his calm gaze meeting Lucien's with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "You've come far, Lucien," Father Mateo said quietly, gesturing toward a worn table scattered with documents etched in faded ink and strange symbols. "This cipher you carry is unlike any I've seen, yet it echoes patterns from the sacred texts." Lucien nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the arcane script. These symbols, religious in nature, seem to encode more than mere words. "I believe they point to a deeper conspiracy, one entwined with both faith and power, but their meaning eludes me." Together, they bent over the texts, their fingers tracing the delicate curves and angles of the cryptic markings. Candlelight danced across the stone walls, casting shifting shadows that seemed to pulse with the secrets contained within the ancient manuscripts. Father Mateo hummed softly, recalling long-forgotten lore. "Here," he murmured, pointing to a cluster of symbols resembling a cross entwined with serpentine lines. "This motif represents duality, light and shadow, truth and deception. It is a warning often used by clandestine sects to mark their influence. If this is part of your cipher, the conspiracy runs deeper than mere political ambition." Lucien's breath caught. The implications were vast. A secret faction manipulating the city's fate under the guise of religious symbolism. This changes everything. We must decipher the entire message before more lives are lost. Outside the monastery's sanctity, the city hummed with a different tension. In the ornate council chamber, Giovanni Rinaldi's dark eyes flicked toward the entrance as Lucien was announced. The council member's lips curled into a thin smile, concealing his growing unease. Political rivalries simmered beneath the polished surface of the marble walls, and Lucien's investigations threatened to upset the delicate balance. "Codebreaker," Giovanni's voice was smooth but edged with steel. "Your pursuits, while intriguing, risk destabilizing the order we have so painstakingly maintained." Lucien met his gaze steadily. "The order is already at risk. If the cipher's warnings hold true, the council itself is the target. Ignoring this threat is far more dangerous." A murmur rippled through the gathered nobles. Giovanni's eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward. "Be cautious, Lucien. Not all allies wear their true colors openly." The warning hung between them like a dagger's edge. Later that evening, Lucien returned to the solitude of the chapel, the stained glass windows filtering the moonlight into shards of color that played across the stone floor. Father Mateo joined him, holding a small parchment with newly interpreted symbols. "This pattern," the priest explained, "links the cipher to an ancient order once thought dissolved. Their reach, however, appears far from forgotten. They operate in the alleys and shadows, guiding events unseen." Lucien's fingers trembled slightly as he absorbed the revelation. "We must expose them before the next assassination." Suddenly, a faint sound outside the chapel door made Lucien tense. He stepped into the alley beyond, ears straining against the distant chorus of the city's nocturnal life. A shadow flickered at the corner of his vision, vanishing before he could focus. The city's eyes were watching, always watching. He whispered into the night, "I will unravel this, or die trying." As the candle flame flickered low, the cipher's secrets grew ever more tangled. The line between friend and foe blurred, and the stakes climbed higher with every passing moment. Lucien knew the path ahead was fraught with peril, but his resolve was unshaken. The city's fate depended on his next move, and in the alleys of power, trust was a currency more precious and dangerous than gold. The night deepened, shadows lengthened, and the game of codes and conspiracies continued, with Lucien at its heart. Determined to pierce the veil before the city's fragile peace was shattered irrevocably. The next morning, as dawn's first light spilled over the terracotta rooftops, Lucien prepared to return to the council chambers. His mind churned with Father Matteo's insights and Giovanni Rinaldi's veiled threats. Each step through the bustling streets was measured, each glance over his shoulder wary. The city was alive with whispers, and Lucien was determined to listen carefully. In the crowded marketplace, a faint rustle near a fruit stall caught his attention. Isabella Fiora's sharp eyes met his for a brief moment. She nodded subtly, a silent signal that her network was active, and the city's secrets were stirring. Lucien allowed himself a brief, cautious smile. Allies were rare, but he would need every one of them if he was to survive the coming storm. His journey through the shadows was only beginning, and the cipher's full meaning awaited revelation in the days ahead, days that would test his intellect, his courage, and his very trust in those around him, and in the labyrinth of codes, alliances, and doubts. One truth was clear: no one was safe, and every secret carried the weight of life and death. The chapter closes as Lucien steps out of the chapel into the awakening city, the morning light casting long shadows behind him. Behind those shadows, enemies and mysteries alike await, and the codebreaker's next move will shape the fragile balance of power in the city-state. The silence before the storm was deafening. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the Renaissance city-state, casting a pale gold glow on the ancient rooftops and winding alleys below. Lucien Delacroix stood silently atop the high city walls, his lean frame cloaked in dark fabric that blended seamlessly with the early morning shadows. The mist curled and shifted through the narrow streets, weaving like a living cipher beneath the watchful gaze of the city's guardian. Despite the fragile tranquility of this moment, Lucien's sharp eyes scanned the horizon, alert to every subtle movement, every whisper carried on the breeze. His mind was a web of codes and secrets, a fortress built from years of deciphering the city's hidden language. Yet even now, standing above the waking city, he knew the peace was but a brief reprieve. The shadows would return, as inevitable as nightfall. Inside his study, a small chamber clotted with manuscripts and cryptic symbols. The morning light filtered through narrow windows, casting long, shifting patterns across the worn wooden floor. Lucien sat at his desk, fingers tracing the complex lines of fresh-coded messages spread before him. His keen intuition unraveled the intricate patterns with practiced ease, but the knowledge they contained was anything but reassuring. New threats were emerging in the undercurrents of power, subtle yet insidious. The city's delicate political order had been shaken, yet beneath the surface, the game of shadows continued unabated. Lucien's calm exterior belied the tension coiling within him, a coil of duty and determination that bound him to this relentless pursuit of truth. Elsewhere, in a dimly lit tavern frequented by those who dwelled in the city's forgotten corners, Isabella, Fiora, and Father Matteo met in hushed conversation. The flickering firelight danced across their faces, casting them in a chiaroscuro of caution and resolve. Isabella's sharp eyes, ever watchful, scanned the room as she spoke softly of the precarious balance they now faced. Father Matteo's aged features bore the weight of many burdens, his penetrating gaze reflecting the moral conflicts that still haunted him. Their whispered words mingled with the crackling of the hearth, a fragile alliance forged in the crucible of shared danger. In this uneasy peace, each understood the cost of vigilance and the necessity of trust, however scarce it had become. Outside, the labyrinthine alleys twisted and turned like veins through the heart of the city. A hooded figure moved silently through the darkness, slipping past shuttered windows and beneath archways where shadows pooled thick and impenetrable. The faint echo of footsteps was swallowed by the night, a reminder that even in moments of calm, the city's secrets were never truly at rest. Danger lurked just out of sight, hidden in the silence between words and the spaces between trust. Lucien's world was one of constant watchfulness, where the line between friend and foe blurred under layers of deception. As the day unfolded, Lucien reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from the isolated scholar haunted by past failures to the resolute guardian of a city whose fate depended on his mastery of codes. The betrayals, the alliances, the narrow escapes, they had all shaped him, forging a new purpose from the ashes of uncertainty. Now, more than ever, he understood that the pursuit of truth was not a destination, but a lifelong vigil. The fragile balance of power he had fought to protect would demand constant guardianship, a ceaseless battle waged in the shadows. Yet amidst the somber resolve, a flicker of hope endured. The city's pulse beat steady beneath the weight of conspiracies and silence. Lucien's vow was clear: to stand watch over the alleys in whispers, to decode the silent threats lurking in the dark, and to face whatever new shadows would inevitably rise. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the city in stark relief, he stepped away from the wall and into the bustling streets below. Once again, to become the unseen sentinel in a world where codes decided the fate of kingdoms. The path ahead remained uncertain, fraught with peril and masked intentions. But Lucien Delacroix, shaped by the crucible of past trials and armed with unyielding determination, was prepared to meet it. For in the alleys of power, in the silence between words and the cryptic symbols etched in stone and parchment, the city's future would be written, and he would be there to read every line, every secret, every shadow. As dusk approached and the city's lights flickered to life, Lucien's silhouette merged with the gathering darkness. The cipher of shadows was never fully solved. It was a living riddle, a dance of loyalty and betrayal that would continue long after tonight. And Lucien, forever changed yet unbroken, embraced his role not just as a codebreaker, but as the city's vigilant guardian, ready to face the shadows that would inevitably emerge in the alleys of power. "The game is never over," he whispered to the night, his voice carrying on the breeze. "It only begins anew." With that, he vanished into the labyrinth, a solitary figure poised between light and darkness, his watch unending. The tavern was thick with smoke and murmurs, the low hum of voices weaving round the flickering candlelight like a living shroud. Lucien Delacroix sat in a shadowed corner, his lean frame hunched over a rough wooden table. His sharp eyes, usually so steady and calculating, now betrayed a storm of disbelief. Across from him sat Rinaldo, a man Lucien had once counted as a trusted ally. The weight of years spent unraveling codes and secrets together had built a fragile bridge of trust. Now that bridge was crumbling. "Why, Rinaldo?" Lucien's voice was barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the tavern's din like a blade. Why feed Marcellus? Why betray everything we've worked for? Rinaldo's eyes darted nervously, his facade of calm shattered. You don't understand, Lucian. The council's corruption runs deeper than you imagine. Marcellus offers a new order, a chance to cleanse the rot. I did what I thought was right. Lucian's fingers clenched into fists. The cryptic symbols he habitually sketched now blurred in his mind. You've endangered us all, and yourself. The betrayal stung more than any physical wound. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, the alleys and shadows of the city closing in with suffocating weight. But Lucian's resolve hardened. He couldn't afford despair. Outside, rain began to fall in heavy sheets, drumming a relentless rhythm on the cobblestones. Isabella Fiora appeared at the tavern's threshold, her sharp eyes scanning the room before settling on Lucian. Without a word, she beckoned him silently. Trust was a scarce commodity now, and Isabella's loyalty was the fragile lifeline he clung to. They slipped out together, the night swallowing them as they moved through the labyrinth of narrow alleys. Each step was measured, each breath cautious. The city was alive with unseen threats. Shadows shifted, and the distant tolling of bells marked an ominous cadence. Assassins, loyal to Marcellus, prowled the streets, hunting for the codebreaker who threatened to unravel their plans. Isabella's knowledge of the city's underbelly was unmatched. She led Lucian through hidden passages and forgotten doorways, her movements graceful and precise. We must stay one step ahead, she murmured, her voice steady despite the danger pressing close. Lucian nodded, the weight of the cipher heavy in his satchel. Every symbol, every coded message pulsed with urgency. The betrayal had not only compromised their safety, but threatened to undo all progress in decoding the deadly puzzle. Back in his cramped study, Lucian lit a single candle. Its flickering flame cast dancing shadows across parchment strewn with fragments of the cipher. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the intricate symbols once more. Each glyph carried secret keys to preventing the next assassination. Yet with each discovery came new layers of complexity and treachery. A sudden noise outside made him freeze. Footsteps, soft but purposeful, echoed in the corridor. Lucian's heart hammered. He reached instinctively for a concealed dagger as the door creaked open. But it was Isabella, her face flushed from the chill and urgency of the night. "We can't stay here," she whispered urgently. "They know where you are. Marcellus's reach is longer than we feared." The city itself seemed to hold its breath a Renaissance maze, where every shadow concealed a threat, every whisper carried a warning. Above, in the gilded darkness of a balcony overlooking the city square, Marcellus Varelli watched with cold, calculating eyes. His aristocratic attire betrayed nothing of the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. To him, Lucian was a mere pawn in a larger game of power and chaos. As the night deepened, Lucian and Isabella vanished into the labyrinth of alleys, their fates intertwined with the city's fragile balance. The betrayal within had fractured their circle, but it had not broken their will. The cipher's secrets demanded to be uncovered, and Lucian knew that only by trusting Isabella and sharpening his own instincts could he hope to survive the shadows closing in. "We must move quickly," he whispered, "before the next shadow falls." The alley echoed with their footsteps, a fleeting rhythm of hope against the encroaching darkness. But in the heart of the city, treachery and danger waited patient, relentless, and deadly. The web tightens, the candle flickered low, casting a wavering light across the scattered parchments that littered Lucien Delacroix's cluttered desk. The small chamber he occupied reeked of old ink, damp wood, and the faint iron tang of fear. Outside, The Renaissance city-state was cloaked in darkness, its narrow alleys whispering secrets and shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. Tonight, however, Lucien was not merely a scholar poring over dusty manuscripts. He was a man on the precipice of revelation. Isabella Fiora sat opposite him, her sharp eyes reflecting the pale glow of the candlelight. Her fingers traced the edges of a folded letter, its seal broken but still bearing the crimson wax emblem, a symbol that Lucien recognized but could not yet place. "These letters," Lucien murmured, "they're not just correspondence. They're a map, a web of coded messages connecting the assassinations we've been tracking." Isabella leaned closer, the low murmur of the city filtering through the shuttered window. "And they all lead to one name, Marcellus Varelli." Lucien's breath caught. The exiled noble's name was not unfamiliar. It echoed through the city's political corridors like a ghost. Once a respected council member, now a shadowy figure orchestrating chaos from the fringes. The letters hinted at a secret society, a cabal operating beneath the veneer of civility, pulling strings to dismantle the fragile peace. "These ciphers," Lucien said, his fingers trembling slightly as he turned a parchment over, "they're layered. It's not just a message, it's a declaration of war." Isabella nodded, her usual calm replaced by a rare tension. "I've heard whispers in the alleys, murmurs of a faction growing bolder, striking at the council's heart." The room seemed to shrink around them, the weight of the knowledge pressing in. Lucien's mind raced, piecing together fragments of betrayal and ambition. Suddenly, a faint sound drifted from the street below, a soft footfall, careful and measured. Both froze, eyes darting to the window. In the darkness, a figure moved with predatory grace, shadow merging with shadow. Alessandra Sforza. Lucien had heard of her, an assassin, as cold as the steel she wielded. Her reputation was whispered in fear, a ghost in the labyrinthine alleys, loyal only to Marcellus Varelli. She was more than a threat. She was a living embodiment of the conspiracy's deadly reach. Isabella's voice barely rose above a whisper. "She watches." Lucien's heart pounded. The game had shifted. No longer was this a puzzle to be solved in dusty halls. It was a battle for survival, played out in the city's darkest corners. Determined, Lucien gathered the letters, the cipher secrets burning in his mind. "We must move quickly. The web tightens, and every thread pulls us closer to danger." They left the chamber, slipping through the city's winding streets, where light fought the encroaching shadows. Each alleyway seemed to breathe with malice, every whispered footstep a reminder that they were not alone. As they reached a secluded tavern, the murmur of voices provided a fragile cloak. Huddled in a shadowed corner, Lucien and Isabella shared their findings with a select few allies, their words a careful dance of code and caution. The revelation of the secret society's existence sent ripples through their ranks, igniting a flame of urgency. Meanwhile, in an opulent chamber far from the alleys, Marcellus Varelli sat before a roaring fire, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across his aristocratic features. His dark eyes gleamed with cold calculation as he reviewed reports from his informants and assassins alike. The city was a chessboard, and each move brought him closer to toppling the council. "The codebreaker grows closer," he murmured, a cruel smile touching his lips. "Let the game begin anew." Back in the city's underbelly, Lucien's resolve hardened. The cipher was no longer just a mystery. It was a battle cry. Each symbol, each encrypted letter, was a thread in a tapestry of betrayal and power. The assassin stalking him was a reminder that the stakes were life and death. As night deepened, the city held its breath. The web was tightening, and the shadows whispered promises of chaos. Lucien knew that to save the city, he would have to confront not only the secrets hidden in ink and cipher, but the very darkness that lurked in human hearts. With steely determination, he whispered to Isabella, "We face a storm, but we must be the calm within it." The alleys awaited, silent and watchful. And somewhere within them, Alessandra moved, a shadow with a blade, ready to strike. The game was far from over, and Lucien Delacroix was running out of time. The candle's flicker cast dancing shadows along the rough-hewn walls of Lucien's study, where the scent of aged parchment and ink filled the air. He sat hunched over his desk, fingers tracing the delicate lines of a worn sketch, a cipher his mentor had once shown him, now blurred by time and tears. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional crackle from the hearth and the soft scratching of his quill as he attempted to reconstruct the fragmentary symbols. His mind churned relentlessly, memories of his mentor's demise surfacing with haunting clarity. That night, years ago, when the city's political purge had swept through the noble houses, claiming lives and shattering trust, had ignited the flame of obsession that now drove him. He remembered the mentor's last words, a whisper of warning about the cyclical nature of power and betrayal, words that now resonated with new urgency. Later, beneath the high, vaulted ceilings of the ancient chapel, the faint scent of incense mingled with the cool stone air. Father Matteo awaited him, seated calmly by a wooden table strewn with manuscripts and coded religious texts. The priest's penetrating gaze met Lucien's as he began these conspiracies. "Lucien, they are not new. The council's history is stained with shadows, just like these. Betrayals born from ambition, cloaked in secrecy, repeating like the turning of the seasons." Lucien leaned in, absorbing every word as Father Matteo pointed to a faded scroll depicting symbols that mirrored those in the cipher. "Each era believes itself unique," the priest said softly, "yet the threads of deceit weave the same tapestry. To break the cycle, we must understand its pattern." The weight of these revelations settled over Lucien like a cloak. He felt the burden of the past and the pressing urgency of the present intertwine, forging a resolve, steeled by knowledge, but tempered by the sorrow of loss. As twilight deepened beyond the stained glass, the two men parted with a shared understanding. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but fortified by insight. Outside, the labyrinthine alleys hummed with the distant sounds of the city's restless pulse. Lucien's cloak fluttered against the chill evening breeze as he paused to survey the shadowed streets where danger lurked unseen. Every whispered secret, every coded message could be a step closer to salvation or ruin. Back in his study, rain began to patter against the window panes, a rhythmic percussion that matched the quickening beat of his heart. Lucien dipped his quill anew, sketching symbols and cipher fragments, each stroke a desperate attempt to untangle the knot of impending doom. His thoughts raced, connecting patterns, recalling betrayals past and present, each discovery a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Yet amid the storm of thoughts and memories, a single truth crystallized: the past was a mirror reflecting the present. And only by facing the ghosts that haunted him could Lucien hope to safeguard the fragile order teetering on the brink. The city awaited his next move, its alleys whispering secrets in the shadows, daring him to unveil the truth buried beneath layers of silence. As the candle burned low, Lucien's eyes hardened with newfound resolve. The echoes of the past were no longer mere memories. They were warnings etched in time, warnings he could not afford to ignore. The cipher awaited, the city's fate hung in balance, and Lucien Delacroix was determined to decode the shadows before they consumed them all. beneath the flickering light of a solitary candle. Lucien Delacroix sat hunched over his cluttered desk, the dense fog of night pressing against the narrow windows of his study. The ancient manuscript lay open before him, its pages yellowed and fragile, the cipher scrawled in a chaotic dance of symbols and cryptic markings. The air was thick with the scent of parchment and candle wax, but Lucien's senses were honed solely on the puzzle before him. His fingers traced the jagged lines of code, seeking patterns that might reveal the next thread in the deadly tapestry he had been unraveling. For hours he worked, the silence broken only by the soft scratching of his quill as he made tentative notes. Each fragment of the cipher teased a glimpse of the truth, a date here, a name there, but it was the recent breakthrough that held the most weight. A segment he had decoded hinted at the next assassination target, and the implications sent a chill through his spine. The city's fragile order teetered on the edge, and time was slipping away with every passing moment. Lucien leaned back, rubbing his temples as the gravity of the revelation settled upon him. His mind raced through the possible victims, each a pillar of the ruling council, each a linchpin in the delicate balance of power. The cipher was a harbinger of chaos, and the shadows it cast threatened to consume the city. A sudden knock at the door drew his attention. Isabella Fiora slipped inside, her presence as quiet as the alley shadows she so deftly navigated. Her sharp eyes, usually lively with mischief, were now heavy with concern. "Lucien," she whispered urgently, "I have news. The factions are stirring faster than we anticipated. I overheard whispers, the conspirators grow bolder." He nodded, gesturing to the manuscript. "I've just deciphered the next target. We must move quickly." Together, they pored over the cipher, aligning their knowledge with the intelligence Isabella had gathered. The city outside was a labyrinth of secrets and danger, the narrow alleys a silent witness to the unfolding storm. The following morning, Lucien and Isabella sought the counsel of Father Matteo. In the shadowed quiet of the chapel, the aged priest examined the symbols Lucien had uncovered, his penetrating gaze tracing the intricate patterns. "These markings," Father Matteo murmured, "are not merely cryptic. They carry a weight of prophecy and warning. We must prepare the council, but be wary. The political currents run deep, and not all ears will heed your words." Their journey to the council chamber was fraught with tension. The ornate room, usually a bastion of order, was alive with murmurs and wary glances. Giovanni Rinaldi, the ambitious council member, regarded Lucien with thinly veiled suspicion. "Your warnings," Giovanni said pointedly, though unsettling, "may serve some political ends. We must not allow fear to rule our decisions." Lucien met his gaze steadily. "This is no ploy, Giovanni. The cipher is real. Innocent lives and the city's future hang in the balance." The council erupted into heated debate. Factions formed and fractured, the air thick with distrust. Some called for immediate action, others urged caution, fearing that rash moves would sow further chaos. The divisions played directly into the hands of the conspirators. As the meeting adjourned without consensus, Lucien felt the crushing weight of uncertainty. Outside, the city continued its restless pulse, shadows lengthening in the alleys where danger lurked unseen. Back in his study, Lucien stared once more at the cipher, fragments of code whispering secrets just beyond reach. Every symbol carried the weight of impending doom, every silence a threat. The clock ticked relentlessly forward, and with it, the fate of the city hung in the balance. He refused to succumb to despair. With Isabella's steadfast loyalty and Father Matteo's wisdom, Lucien resolved to press on, to decode the remaining mysteries and expose the conspiracy before more blood was spilled. But as the sun set and the alleys darkened, a chilling realization settled in his bones. The true danger was not just in the assassinations foretold, but in the fractures within those sworn to protect the city. Trust was a rare commodity, and betrayal hid behind every shadow. The cipher's fragments were falling into place, but the picture they painted was one of imminent catastrophe. Lucien's path was clear but perilous. Unravel the cipher's final secrets and rally the fractured council before the next death was claimed. And somewhere in the depths of the city, eyes watched, waiting, as the game of shadows played out beneath the Renaissance moon. The race against time had begun. The narrow back room of the tavern smelled of stale ale and wood smoke, the air heavy with the murmurs of patrons, oblivious to the gravity of the conversation unfolding in its shadows. Isabella Fiora sat across from her father, his hands clenched tightly around a worn ledger. The candlelight flickered, casting trembling shadows on the peeling plaster walls, their faces etched with worry and determination. "Father," Isabella whispered, her voice steady despite the turmoil within, "we cannot carry this debt any longer. The collectors grow bolder each day, and I fear what they might do if we falter again." Her father sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. "I know, Isabella, but the city's politics have tightened like a noose around us all. We owe more to the wrong people than we can ever repay. There are whispers that the faction, led by Marcellus Varelli, is behind the relentless pressure." Isabella's sharp eyes narrowed. "Then we must find a way to break free before they break us first. Lucien has been trying to decode the messages that tie these threads together. If we can anticipate their moves, perhaps we can protect not just ourselves, but the council too." The toll of the city's unrest weighed heavily on her, the intersection of personal survival and political intrigue blurring into a dangerous dance. As the tavern's door creaked open, the cold night air spilled inside, carrying distant echoes of footsteps and whispered threats. Later that evening, Lucien Delacroix and Isabella navigated the labyrinthian alleys, their footsteps muffled by the soft patter of an unexpected rain. The stone walls seemed to close in as shadows lengthened with the setting sun. The city's secrets whispered in every corner. "They're tightening the noose," Lucien murmured, glancing over his shoulder. "Marcellus's faction is more organized than we feared." Isabella's grip tightened on the small satchel she carried, filled with coded messages and intelligence gathered from the city's underbelly. "We'll have to move faster. Every moment counts if we're to warn the council and protect your informants." Their conversation was cut short by a distant shout, a warning, a threat, or perhaps a trap. They melted deeper into the shadows, their senses heightened, every alley a potential death trap. The city was a maze of danger, and trust was a rare commodity. Meanwhile, far from the damp alleys and flickering tavern candles, Marcellus Varelli stood in his chamber overlooking the city. The opulence of his surroundings, a stark contrast to the grimy streets, below reflected his ruthless ambition. The dark eyes that scanned the cityscape were cold and calculating, every flicker of the torchlight revealing a face hardened by exile and revenge. "Soon," he whispered to himself, "the council will crumble, and from the ashes I will rise." Plans were set in motion with chilling precision. Assassins were dispatched, informants tightened their grip, and the city's fragile order edged closer to collapse. Marcellus's shadow stretched far and wide, a dark omen looming over the Renaissance city-state. Back on a rooftop under an ink-black sky, Isabella stood alone, the weight of her decisions pressing upon her like the chill wind that whipped her cloak. The city sprawled below, an intricate tapestry of light and shadow, secrets and lies. Her thoughts swirled a tempest of fear for her family, loyalty to Lucien, and the unyielding desire to survive. "How much must I sacrifice?" she murmured, her breath visible in the cold night air. The answer was as elusive as the codes Lucien sought to decipher, tangled in betrayal and hope. As the night deepened, the city held its breath. Beneath the surface, alliances shifted, dangers multiplied, and the game of shadows played on. Isabella and Lucien stood at the heart of the storm, their courage tested by the intertwining threads of personal sacrifice and political upheaval. The next move would be critical not just for their survival, but for the fate of the city itself. The alleys whispered secrets, and in those whispers lay the fragile promise of salvation or the stark certainty of ruin. The shadows were growing longer, and the night was far from over. The candle's flicker cast erratic shadows against the stone walls as Lucien Delacroix hunched over the ancient parchments spread before him. His fingers traced the cryptic symbols, his eyes darting back and forth, piecing together the language of shadows. Each glyph, each curve and slash, whispered secrets of the looming calamity. The cipher was no longer merely a puzzle, it was a countdown. The sequence he had uncovered revealed a hastening pace, the assassinations closing in faster than he had dared hope. "The timeline, it's accelerating," Lucien murmured, lifting his gaze to the worn maps of the city pinned nearby. The names of council members were inked in faded script, proximity marking the danger that shadowed their lives. Isabella Fiora stood quietly in the corner, her sharp eyes reflecting the candlelight. "We must move quickly," she urged softly. "The streets grow more perilous with every hour." Lucien nodded. "And Alessandra Sforza won't rest until she's silenced me. Her pursuit is relentless." Isabella's gaze hardened. "Then we must be swifter." The city outside was alive with whispers and secrets. Rain had begun to fall, slicking the cobblestones and muffling footsteps. Isabella slipped out into the night, her movements a silent dance through the maze of alleys. Her senses were attuned to every shadow, every whispered conversation. The underground murmurs spoke of unrest, of factions shifting like the tides beneath the fragile surface of governance. Lucien remained behind, poring over the cipher's layers. Father Matteo had joined him earlier, offering insights into the religious symbolism that complicated the code. "These symbols," the priest said, stroking his aged beard, "suggest not just political conspiracy, but something deeper, ran invocation of chaos masked in faith." Lucien sighed. "It's as if the city itself breathes secrets, hiding them in plain sight." As dawn crept over the horizon, a summons interrupted their work. Giovanni Rinaldi awaited in the council chambers, his expression a blend of suspicion and calculated charm. The chamber was bright with morning light, but the atmosphere was dense with unspoken accusations. "Delacroix," Giovanni began, his voice smooth but edged, "your investigations tread dangerously close to matters better left untouched." Lucien met his gaze steadily. "I seek only to protect the city." Giovanni's smile was thin. "And yet, your presence here sows discord. Trust is fragile among us." The tension was palpable, an invisible thread threatening to snap and send the chamber into chaos. Lucien knew that with each revelation, the web grew more tangled. Trust was a currency in short supply, and betrayal lurked behind every smile. Night fell once more, and the city's shadows deepened. From her rooftop perch, Alessandra Sforza observed Lucien's movements, her breath steady, eyes cold and calculating. She was the shadow stalking him, the silent threat that had become all too real. Back in the hidden chamber, Lucien and Isabella convened, their voices low. "We must prepare," Lucien said, "for the storm that gathers is unlike any we have faced." Isabella nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "Then let us face it together." The cipher's secrets whispered of an approaching tempest, and Lucien Delacroix stood at the heart of it, a solitary figure against the gathering storm. But trust was a fragile shield, and in the alleys of the city, shadows moved with deadly purpose, ready to strike the moment vigilance faltered. As the chapter closed, Lucien's mind raced. Who among his allies was truly loyal, and who wore the mask of friendship while plotting his downfall? The answer would decide not only his fate, but the fate of the city itself.